That's what happens with age. You know, it's true, when you have too much information, it's yes. I even have the Harry Potter game on my phone. Niantic, who did, I spit out a game, it's fabulous.
Yeah, we'll turn on the clock, you'll be able to see it on the screen. Okay?
I printed mine pretty big, so I can line space and read it.
Nice try. Challenge is getting a neighbor. Is 10 years, 2 other neighborhoods done. They say, you know,
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, well, I think we're gonna need a huge change, but it's just as. Yeah. Yeah, but there's nobody here.
Although all the people are.
good that you're here.
That's the next step.
Hi, my name is Dennis Woods. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. I want to thank you all for waiting. I'd like to reconvene the Planning Commission of September 11th, 2019, and I assume because we have some new members, should we take a new roll call?
Commissioners Donenfeld? Gardner?
Present.
Hirschbein?
Present.
Song?
Present.
Vice Chair Maruzi?
Here.
And Chair Woods.
Present.
Six
Thank you.
members present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we want to restate the posting of the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The agenda was posted on Thursday, September the 5th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Okay. And we've already accepted the agenda, so I guess the next thing on the item is public comment. This time is set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on consent calendar, non-public hearing items, and items of general interest within the subject matter of the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. If you wish to speak, please come forward at this time for non-public items. Are there members in the audience that want to speak? If you'd come forward, and you'd have 3 minutes. If you'd come forward and state your name, please.
And Mr. Chair, if I might, just to make it clear for members of the public, if you are here to speak on items 4A, 4B, or 4C, this is the time to do it.
Thank you. I
wrote my comments. This is my first hearing, so good afternoon. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, am I speaking to this?
Hold on one moment. Is it, no.
Is this on? Hello?
It says,
Okay, is it on now? Yeah? All right. I'm trying to stand at 3 minutes here. Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Nelson. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Asia SF. I've been with the company 19 of the last 21 years. Asia SF is my name is Aaron Nelson. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Asia SF Restaurant in San Francisco. I've been with the company 19 of the last 21 years. This thing is not very loud, is it? Asia SF is a restaurant and a cabaret in San Francisco and has become a celebrated and iconic institution in its 21 years in business. As early leaders in the employment and empowerment of transgender persons, we are proud to be joining Palm Springs with this second location. I'm here today to support extension of the hours to the use permit from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. I have read the staff reporting. We agree to all the conditions with the exception that we would ask that there not be a distinction between the live music and recorded music. We will still agree to all the same limits on bass, frequency, and hertz as recorded music. Our primary goal with the space is to not have an ongoing pool party, but to cater primarily to weddings on weekends. And it is largely likely that these would want a small band or violins or some kind of music, and those events typically don't start until 4 p.m. And we understand that there's a hard 10 o'clock end time. Our business plan is reliant on revenues from the outside space for events, space which the city of Palm Springs also needs to help support its tourism and special events needs. It is an unfortunate reality, and we acknowledge that the previous tenants had some issues with noise. It's obvious to me when we took over the space, looking at what their current setup was, that they couldn't possibly have been complying with what their use requirements were, and that's probably maybe why they closed in a year and a half. But I can't do anything about the past or explain other people's business choices, but we are a very different business and will operate very differently. We've removed all the previous equipment, the giant hanging speakers and the DJ booth from the outside area. We agree to have the limiters, frequency restrictions required that limit bass and no subwoofers will be allowed. We've hired a sound consultant who is also here with me today to review and plan for any new equipment and to adhere to use restrictions. There's also a 6-month and I believe a 1-year review by staff suggested, which we will welcome because we're going to stay within our compliance with the approved use. In short, we will take all necessary measures to operate as a professional business in a commercial district with the approved use and minimize any potential adverse effects to neighbors. We were not required to do so, but we did ask Denise Goolsby to forward our welcome letter to surrounding neighbors, and we also personally mailed out letters ourselves. On a personal note, I'm also a homeowner, and I have been president of my homeowners association for 10 years, so I get it. There's a change happening in the neighborhood. There are neighbors there. They've been through something in the past. We're going to do everything we can to be professional, good, and polite, responsible neighbors to them, and we're going to have some special reach outs ahead of time before the business opens so I can personally meet with them. But I would ask the committee to approve our application and allow all types of music with the same limits on sound as recorded music and to give us the same opportunity as a business to operate responsibly on our leased location. And I'd be happy to answer any questions when our agenda item is called.
are you going to be staying during the duration when your item is up for?
Sure, yes, absolutely.
Okay, we may call on you. I'm not sure we will, but thank
Great.
you if you're here.
Thank you for your time. No, sorry, that was fast. Okay.
Hello, Commissioners.
Hold on.
My name's Steve Aguilar. and-
Steve, could you hold on one moment? There, the mic goes on. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm getting a little closer. Sorry about that. I am the managing member of a partnership that owns the building at 1251 Montalvo. That's an industrial building that's had quite a bit of controversy around it. I missed the last July 24th meeting, but I did listen to all the entire video and everything of what transpired with the community. I'm fully aware of what their concerns are and fully prepared to deal with every single point and every single concern that they have in regards to this building. I thought the meeting that just took place earlier was a closed door meeting. That's why I showed up at 1:30, my bad. But I wanted to just state that we've been working on this project since January of 2018. We went through all the proper city channels to find out to make sure this building was compliant 100% across the board on every level, setbacks, everything. We have invested a lot of money and are very concerned about some of the changes you're doing midway in our process. I'm not sure if anything was ruled upon over there in regards to setbacks or changes, and I'm more concerned about things that are impacting people that are in process right now, not new ones that will fall under new guidelines. Is that what the process is going to be?
Thank you. I would suggest that what you do is you contact staff. There'll be more opportunities for you to participate. So
Okay.
they're not completely closed off. Today was just the first hearing.
Okay, so there'll be more dialogue about that.
There'll be more dialogue,
Okay,
yes.
is there a date on that? Because getting notices and stuff has been a little challenging.
Yeah, we will be discussing the issue at the next Planning Commission meeting on September the 25th.
September 25th.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're here to speak on the items dealing with either Asia SF, the Pinnacle Single Family Home, and/or the Miralon Homes, this is the time to speak.
Hi, my name is Audrey Joseph. I'm here to speak on Asia SF. I am working with them on their sound attenuation. I have before me 2 emails that were sent to you guys regarding our ask for extended hours outside, and they're concerned about the sound. As Aaron already said, all of the large speakers that were hung really high have been taken down. We intend to do the proper sound attenuation outside using compressor limiters to meet the standards that the city set in our conditions, additionally adding equalizers so that we can control the frequencies. All our speakers will be short throw, and in Ms. Smith's email where she was concerned about the sound hitting the mountain, in order for the sound to reflect off the mountain, it has to hit the mountain. These speakers will not do that. Also, let's see, what else? I have an issue with people calling music sound pollution. I don't think it is. I think music is there for our enjoyment and our benefit. All of our speakers will be facing away from the residential areas, as stated in our application. It is important for this business, who is investing so much in remodeling this place that was totally trashed and derelict for a long period of time, for them to be able to participate in income streams. So beside weddings, to be able to participate in other Palm Springs iconic events like Modernism and Pride and the Dinah, and to be able to do those kinds of events to enhance their business. And I think that we will be totally in compliant for all of those events, and I hope you do grant them their live music thing until for 10 o'clock, because most weddings after that start at 4, their receptions go to 8 o'clock, and if they had to kill their band at 6 o'clock, it would inhibit Asia's ability to do that form of business. Thank you very much. I will remain here for questions about any other sound issues that you might have.
Thank you, Audrey. You state your name for the record.
My name is Mark Matthews, and I'm here for the Pinnacle Homeowners Association matter. I brought 2 things that I was going to hand out, but one is a map that shows where an Arroyo Seco was filled with dirt that affects the watershed runoff. And so I'll provide a copy of that to the staff and then an aerial photo of the area. Our concern, can you get that to them for when the hearing starts? Our concern is that a runoff was filled with dirt, and when it rains, we're going to have a real serious problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Bradley Schuckhart. I work for Freehold Communities. We're the developer of the Miralon project. I just wanted to thank the committee for their time. I'm here in support of the Christopher Holmes request for architectural approval. I know there are members of this body who have participated extensively in study sessions to come up with help guide Christopher in their design of their homes. We as master developers are very concerned with the quality of those homes. We believe that the architecture they're putting forth meets and exceeds our expectations and hopefully the expectations of this body. And I would just strongly encourage the commission to consider the architecture in relation to the approved design guidelines that have been before this body as well as the city council. So Again, we find them fully compliant. We're excited to have them get going. It's been a long time in coming, and we look forward to seeing homes coming out of the ground. And just as a quick aside, Woodbridge Homes is actively constructing homes as we speak. So the project is moving forward, the amenity center is under construction, and we're looking forward to this project finally reaching fruition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick McCabe. I'm with Christopher Homes. I just want to echo Brad's comments on us being very excited to get out there and get started on this project. It has been something we've been working on for a long time. We started with a set of design guidelines that really set the stage for design. We went through 3 joint committee meetings with a few members from this panel and then also a few members from the Architectural Advisory Committee. We actually went through a lot of challenge, but we were challenged to take our product, and instead of placing elements that you see from the architects out here, we were challenged to actually show them and utilize their function, show them and develop better massing, better architecture, better placement of these features. So instead of a decorative feature, they actually have a useful function. So that being said, I think at the end of the day, it was very productive. We love the product that has developed from this process. There is quite a big change from the initial product to the ending product. And as I said, we're happy about it and we're excited to start out there. I will be here with my architect and my landscape architect with any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience to speak on any items? Sir, please come forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott St. Cyr, and I am a homeowner. I'm here for the Asia SF project. I'm a homeowner at Dakota, which is the development that's directly across the street from there. When we first bought our home, which we paid a significant amount of money for, Hacienda was still open. I'm not comparing the two. But I will tell you that the noise was pretty loud. Also, when the Ace Hotel has their parties for Splash House, we still hear that noise. I think it's great that there's been some changes to this. I hope that those things work. I will also say that I think music is wonderful. I want to choose what music and the sound that is in my home and the audibility of that sound. So I have major concerns. I would love to see something in that building. I think that it's a horrible waste that it's sitting there empty. I'm concerned that this company who isn't from Palm Springs is coming in to create this. I'm all for it. I'm not sure I'm for the 10 o'clock rule. I think maybe we could do 7, but I'm not sure that 10 really works. I want to be able to go out in my yard, have dinner, and not have to worry about extra noises, particularly on the weekend. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks for coming out and participating. Anyone else in the audience to speak on a matter that you want to address the commission with? Seeing nothing, I'm going to move on to the consent calendar. And on the consent calendar, we have the first item on the the one and only item on the consent calendar is approval of the minutes of July 10th, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Chair.
Oops.
Mr. Chair, if I might, we also have item 1B on the consent calendar, which is the sign for the Twin Palms Neighborhood
Yes.
Organization.
Yes, thank you.
I will move that as well.
If we have a first to move, and we'll go into discussion in a moment. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion. Commissioner Gardner.
I would have asked this earlier, but I'm just curious because it didn't say anything about the covenant to care for the Twin Palms neighborhood sign. Is there just any information about what that covenant looks like? I'm just curious.
So in the past, what we've done is it's basically just designating who is responsible for maintaining the sign. It's really a simple form, usually a 2-page form that we've done. We did it with the Sunmore sign that you see on Farrell. So it would be a really simple form that basically designates who's responsible for maintaining that sign.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? I'll call for the question. Can we have your vote, please? Or just say aye. Aye. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? No opposed, it passes. Thank you. The next item we're going on to is our public hearing item number 2A, which is EHOF Canyon View LLC for a 2-year extension of time for vesting track map number 36969, Planned Development District number 381, and major architectural approval for an 80-lot, single-family residential development on an undeveloped 13.25-acre parcel located at the southwest corner of East Palm Canyon Drive and Matthew Drive. Can we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Chair Woods and Planning Commissioners. This item is a request to extend the entitlements for the Canyon View project, which, as you stated, is an 80-lot, single-family subdivision that consists of 1- and 2-story homes, as you see here on the screen. The project abuts East Palm Canyon to the north, Matthew Drive to the south and east, and Linden Way to the west. The applicant has been, well, before I get into that, the project, as you can see, it does involve a series of motor courts homes that surround motor courts. You can see here, this is a cluster of 8 homes in one case. And as I said, they are 1- and 2-story homes that range from about 2,200 square feet to 2,600 square feet in size. So this is the first floor that you have here on the screen, 2-car garages, the primary living area, a master bedroom on the ground floor. The second floor contains additional bedrooms and some additional living space. So this floor plan kind of gives you a closer view of Plan 3. The orange is the living area, the bedrooms are blue, and the purple is the accessory bathroom areas and closet areas. The architecture is a modern design architecture. There are 3 plans with variations of sloped butterfly and flat roofs. So those are just 3 variations of the plan. And then as you see here on the plan, this is just some street views, conceptual views of the project from different vantage points throughout. So the project has run into some issues in terms of moving forward. The master drainage plan, line 41, the area continues to delay the project, and they have the Riverside County Flood Control District has gotten further along in their process to get that underway. That would impact the project's on-site drainage, and as well as how the drainage from adjacent areas are conveyed around the site. So as you may recall, for this project, there was quite a significant drainage moat, if you will, that went around the project. You see it here on the south and west side of the site. So that potentially could be eliminated, but ultimately it would have to be resolved as the line 41 is finished and finalized. So that has been a delay for this project in moving it forward. The applicant has submitted a number of items to the city to move it forward. They have included the hydrology study, on-site drainage, off-site and on-site street plans, rough grading plan, sewer plan, the water quality management plan, and the final map for the subdivision. So that they have done a significant number of items to move the project forward. And also, lastly, they have submitted the final development plan, which is in process with the planning department. So staff is recommending that the commission approve the 2-year extension. The applicant believes that they will be able to move the project forward fully within this 2-year timeframe. So that's what the recommendation here is today. We also recommend that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the City Council for the vesting tentative tract map. As required by the municipal code, the time extension must be approved by the City Council for that request. So that concludes my presentation. The one additional item I would note is staff did provide some additional exhibits for this project, just showing you what the project plans were that were approved by the City Council back in 2017. So you have that at the dais today. And again, I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to open it to questions, but I'm going to start off with the first question. Is there a reason that we're giving a 2-year versus the traditional 1 year?
The zoning code allows for up to 2-year extension, but it cannot exceed 2 years. And ultimately, it's up to the commission's discretion whether they choose to approve a 1 or 2 year. But staff's recommendation for 2 years was because of the Line 41 issues that are impacting this site.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Hirschbein.
Can we hear from the city engineer as far as some of these issues? I think they need to be fleshed out a little bit before we can sort of opine on this. I think there's certain items missing from the staff report that would help us understand the process and what we're waiting for and what we hope to get out of it from the process from Riverside County.
Good afternoon. So what is happening with Riverside County Flood Control is there is a master plan of drainage, and it's considered Line 41. And to the south of this project, there is somewhat of a dam debris basin that is part of that project. And the project is, from what we understand, is fully funded. They're in the process of their final design, which is a little bit of land acquisition, some final design with some future projects, this being one of them. And the construction of Line 41 is going to change the landscape of this project a little bit. So the proposed drainage, I don't want to use the word moat, but I'm going to use the word moat, around this project would virtually become unnecessary because of the improvements that Riverside County Flood Control is doing. So in doing that, it will give this developer the opportunity to actually do something with that area. What they're going to propose with that area is not fully known yet because the plans for Riverside County Flood Control are at about a 90% in their design stage. They indicated to us, Riverside County Flood Control indicated to us, hopefully by the end of the year, they'll be done to go out to public bid and begin their final bidding process the first of the year. So with that, the developer would have the opportunity to do something with that moat area around their project, maybe a pedestrian paseo, maybe some more robust landscaping rather than this drainage area around the thing. So that's kind of what's been causing a little bit of the delay.
Can you point that out on a slide? Because we have a lot of new members here that weren't around when this was approved, just so the new members understand the areas you're talking about.
So David's got a nice fancy remote over there. So right there where the circle's going around, this is the drainage area that's to the south of it along Matthew Drive. And as it continues up Linden Way, and it goes up Linden Way, and then it connects to a master storm drain line, which is Line 41, which is going to run along East Palm Canyon back to Matthew Drive. So essentially it's creating this giant drainage area around the entire project. The Riverside County Flood Control Project will more than likely, the impacts, they'll most likely eliminate a good portion of that drainage area along Matthew and along Linden, and it'll end up being a more robust landscaped area.
How does it impact the area along Palm Canyon?
It doesn't really impact that as much as more of their design when it comes to where Matthew Drive and East Palm Canyon meet, those bridges, how that culvert gets underneath those little bridge areas. They're working on those final design plans now, but that drainage area along East Palm Canyon probably won't change much.
So that they would need to maintain that landscape.
Correct.
Swale along East Palm Canyon there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Song.
So going along with that, one of the biggest challenges of any project is flood control. I think what I'm curious about is that if the engineering plans are already in progress, they've probably gone through several plan check corrections. I experienced many projects in which the site scrubbing, grading, PAT certification is happening along the approval process with Riverside Flood Control because they take so long. So do you happen to know why the applicant has not actually started? Because time is money, right? So the question is, how come the on-site or the grading has not occurred parallel to the approval process of flood control?
That I cannot answer. All I can tell you is that the improvement plans have been submitted, and they have gone through plan check, and that's about it. The applicant is probably here, or Riverside County Flood Control is here, and they could probably shed a little bit more light on this.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, hearing no additional, is the applicant here?
Yes.
Okay, if you'd come to the, I'd like to open the public hearing. You're going to have 10 minutes to talk, and then when you're done, we'll hear from the public, and then there'll be 2 minutes for a rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Donald Poving, and I'm here on behalf of Canyon View Project. To answer Commissioner Song's question, we actually were planning on moving forward with our own internal plans, separate of the Riverside County flood control facilities. A couple of years ago, city staff approached us asking us to see if we would be open to working with Riverside County Flood Control in joint facilities. And at that time, Riverside County Flood Control had several issues. Number one, funding was an issue. Funding was not yet in place. Conservation easements needed to be obtained, as well as design had not yet started. And so, to your point, we never like to tie our project to something that is a complete unknown. So we went ahead and proceeded with our own separate set of plans and design. So on September 24th of 2018, we submitted all of our internal designs to the city for plan check. And as of a couple months ago, all our plans were in either third, fourth, or final plan check. So most of the plans are actually ready to be approved. Our options at this point in time were to proceed with our own plans that we have already designed, or to try to work with Riverside County Flood Control. And at that point, city staff asked if we could help work with flood control in order to eliminate the dual facilities, because once the flood control facilities are installed, you'll have dual storm drain facilities, which would just be an eyesore. So we looked at it and we felt that working with flood control would be ideal, because instead of having the channels on the south and east side of the or west side of the project, we could actually have additional landscaped area, which would be a benefit to not only our project but the community. And so that is the rationale for why we're requesting the 2-year extension. The other thing is we cannot complete our preference would have been to come to the Planning Commission today with a full set of plans and landscape drawings as to what our intent is, but we don't have fully approved plans from flood control. As of our meeting last month with city staff and flood control, we were only 60% through, and that 60% set from flood control had not yet been checked. So we do not have those plans, so we can't figure out what land area we're actually gaining and where we would need to move walls or any other storm drain facilities. So that's why we're requesting the 2 years, is to allow us time to work with flood control. Once their plans are approved and ready to be released to us, we will overlay that to our plans and update our plans accordingly and submit that into the city.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take public comments, and then you'll have 2 minutes for a rebuttal, and then we may ask you questions. Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak on this item? Seeing no one here, the applicant's more than willing to come back up. You have 2 more minutes, but you might want to come up in case there's questions. You can take your 2 minutes if you like.
Thank you.
You're good. Okay. Are there any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Song?
So, yeah, thank you for explaining that. So I'm just curious, I'm sorry, are you part of the developer or the architectural team?
The developer.
The developer. How did it work that you were able to wait this long?
Well, this project has a very long history. There were issues with obtaining skip financing. So when the project was approved, after the project was approved, we were looking to obtain skip financing in order to fund some of the facilities. And we had to go back and forth with city staff and city council several times, which took about a good year for us to resolve. And so that was resolved earlier this year. And once that, we were working through that in parallel with our plans. So yeah, that was what we were
What's
working on.
skip financing? I don't know that term.
SCIF financing is a form of a CFD, or Community Facilities District financing, but instead of selling bonds at the project level, bonds are sold at the state level, so we would be participating in a state program to fund some public facilities at the project.
The drainage specifically?
No, these would be offsite. So all on-site drainage facilities, those are funded internally.
And
by
what
the project.
off-site requirements are there of the project?
There are off-site improvements, including Palm Canyon. There are improvements there. There's signalization. There's undergrounding of power poles that are.
I thought that was deferred.
It is deferred. So part of the financing will include funding of deferred improvements, which is in concert with the original approval.
So what are the, I'm sorry, I took your time.
No, we're doing it together.
We're tag teaming. So what are the public improvements as part of the first phase that are part of the construction of this project?
So we plan on developing the entire site in one phase.
No, off-site.
Off-site are.
Yeah, the skip financing, what will it finance as part of the initial construction?
I don't have an exact list of all the facilities that are included that are part of the skip financing, but I can certainly get that for you.
Any?
Excuse
Do you know any?
I think I mentioned the widening on Palm Canyon Drive, the undergrounding of the power poles.
I thought that was deferred, though.
It is.
I'm talking about things that aren't deferred.
Okay, so is that your distinction between the first phase and the second
Yeah.
phase? Okay. Again, Palm Canyon, part of that will need to be improved for this project.
Which is what, widening Palm Canyon?
I don't have the plans in front of me.
You don't
I
know,
apologize.
okay.
So from what you're saying is that your on-site engineering grading drainage plans, they're going through plan check corrections as well as your building plans.
Not the building plans yet. So all of our improvement plans were submitted in September of last year, and all are ready to be approved or close to being approved by the city's third-party plan check contractor, ERSC. At that point, before they were approved, city staff asked us to revisit the Riverside County Flood Control Line 41 facilities.
So it will be premature for you to be working on the building plans?
Exactly.
I see, okay.
But we did submit our final PDD plans, so that is in the city as of May. So those are ready to go, and once that is approved, we would immediately start our construction drawings.
Okay, in your opinion, you do need 2 years?
It could be, we may only need 6 months, we may need a year, we may need 2 years. It strictly depends on how quickly flood control can move.
But in your sort of funding planning strategy, you don't have to be open by a certain time in order to...
Well, according to our pro forma and funding strategy, we were supposed to be built already. So obviously, the sooner the better for us. It doesn't behoove us to hold on to the project for longer. I think like to your comment earlier, time is money, and the longer we hold this, the worse it is for us. So the quicker we can move, the better for us.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
Have you had discussions with the flood control district?
Yes.
You?
Yes, I personally
You
have.
Okay, and so does, so does your knowledge of what the flood control district has indicated to you comport with city managers saying that they're 90% done now and they expect to be 100% done by the end of the year with these drawings?
I personally sat in 3 meetings with both city staff and flood control regarding plan status. As of our last meeting last month, flood control was 60% in terms of progress on their.
So not 90%?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was 90, but I have an email from them also confirming that they are 60%.
60, not 90?
60.
Okay, and did they indicate to you that they would be completed by the end of the year?
That was their initial date. I've requested a schedule from them, and they have not yet provided that.
But they've indicated to you that the drawings will be done by the end of the year?
Correct.
And at that point, you would be able to complete all of your landscape drawings and everything else you need to submit to the city?
Correct. At that point, we would restart our design, or
Okay.
revise our design.
Okay. And maybe this is for staff, that 2-year extension, what has to take place in that 2-year extension? Do they have to start construction within that 2-year period?
No, they would just have to submit their and get approval for their final development plan.
And would that include construction documents?
Yes, well, it would include probably 70 to 90% construction documents. So the final design of the homes and the site plan and landscape plans.
Okay, and so they should be ready to start by the end of the year, and then they would have to complete these drawings and submit them, not get approval, but submit them?
Yeah, the challenge would also be how the final hydrology is approved, because if the city's requiring that the hydrology also include the swale around the property, that obviously if they build that per the approved plan, then it's not going to be what I think everyone would feel would be a better design, which would be landscape.
No, but by the end of the year, he's going to have Riverside County's new plans that would then negate the need for this swale around the property. He can start his final drawings, and he'll submit them to city. Does this 2-year period have to include city approval or just submittal?
The 2-year approval has to include approval of the final development plan.
So it has to be drawn, submitted, and approved within the extension period?
Yes.
Okay.
Same with the map. The map would have to be final.
Okay, any more questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I'll close the public hearing and open it to commission comments. Commissioner Dunnenfeld.
First of all, I appreciate Commissioner Song and Hirschbein getting all the details out on the table. When you're dealing with 2 governmental agencies and a private developer, things go wrong. They just do. Delays happen. 60% done. Boy, that 40%, I don't know if it's going to be done by the end of the year. So I know we typically want to keep people on shorter extension time periods, but with respect to this one, since there are so many entities involved in the planning of this, and the city of Palm Springs might not like what ends up with Riverside County, I think we should give them the 2 years. I'm in favor of 2-year extension.
Is there a second?
I'll make the motion. I hadn't made the motion, but I'll be happy to for the 2-year extension.
And I'll second that. Okay, open for discussion. Commissioner Hirschbein.
I'm not necessarily against 2 years, but I would like to see the redesigned landscape plan come back to the commission for approval, because that it's not necessarily a major change to the site plan, but it's a significant change to the site plan, and I think we deserve a chance to review it and approve it, because we did initially, and as this project presents to the public is what the change is all about. So I would like the extension contingent on us approving the revised site plan, assuming that these drainage swales are eliminated as a need because of the work that Riverside County is going to be doing.
Mr. Chair, I would just say that we agree with Mr. Hirschbein's comments. We want you to see the final landscape plan as well, and so that's going to come back to you with the final PDD plans.
So could we make that a contingency of our extension?
We'll go ahead and include that as a condition of approval, just so it's clear.
Okay, and
if the motion.
The final PD, that's like way at the end of the process?
It's closer to the end of the process, yes.
Can we make it sooner? Like, I don't mean tomorrow sooner, but I don't want to wait to the end to look at that, because I think that's a pretty significant piece of what we review. We review how this project interfaces with the public.
It might be that we bring both of them together at the same time. It might be sooner than you think. But again, we'd be happy to do that once the landscape revision is available.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Is that okay with the maker of the motion?
Yes, it is.
And the second?
Yeah.
Okay, any more discussion? Commissioner Song.
And I think this is, to add to what Michael was saying, is that when we review this project, one of the major sacrifices was that there was no doors on the street. We wanted to be able to have this interaction between the Matthew Drive, and because it was this retention issue and stormwater issue. And so if that issue goes away, I believe the site has an opportunity to now be able to connect to the street. So without saying, you better redesign it, I'm bringing back the memory recall on those issues.
Thank you. I appreciate that because institutional knowledge means a lot to those that weren't in the original discussion. Hearing no more discussion, I'll call the question, and can we vote?
Well, wait, you have to, that part of the.
Yeah. Okay, you passed unanimously. Congratulations, and good luck with your project and working with flood control. You know. We know it's not easy. Okay, the next item on the public hearing agenda is an appeal of Mark Hogan of Twist Palm Springs, representing Zalika Villalobos LP and Larinex Villalobos LP, requesting the Planning Commission to remove conditions of appeal engineering 3 through condition engineering 11 for the approval of a conditional use permit to convert the existing 17-unit short-term rental to hotel at the Twist located at 140 West Villalobos. Can we have a staff report, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon. This project pertains to a conditional use permit for the Twist, a 35-unit apartment/short-term rental complex to convert its 17 short-term rental units to hotel units. As you may recall, the Planning Commission reviewed this project on June 12th of this year and approved the application subject to the conditions of approval, which included conditions that are imposed by the Department of Engineering Services. On June 20th, the applicant filed an appeal to request the removal of specific conditions. It's engineering conditions number 3 through number 11. And the appeal was reviewed by the City Council on July 24th. And at the meeting, the City Council decided to defer the matter back to the Planning Commission. And that is the reason why you're reviewing this project today. Because the applicant's request pertains to the conditions that are imposed by the Engineering Services Department, Engineering Department service staff will continue this presentation, and the applicant is here in the audience today, and they've also prepared a PowerPoint that they would like to present to the commissioners. And there are 2 additional materials that are in front of you for this project.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Joel Montalvo. I'm the Assistant Director of Engineering Services. Mess up the PowerPoint. Can you go back to the slides, please? So the subject property has some challenges, ADA challenges, that the engineering department reviewed and issued conditions on. One of the conditions that we were imposing on the project was a sidewalk on West Villalobos and a sidewalk on the Camino del Corto. So when we reviewed the project, we had certain findings, and we found that and in addition to the sidewalks, there were street improvements that were imposed to be done on Camino del Corto. When we reviewed the project, we found that the street improvements were necessary on West Villalobos to accommodate the persons with disability. We also found that on, go backwards here, sorry. And we also found that the 5 parking spaces on North Camino del Corto are located within the public right-of-way, and they should not be used as public parking or private parking. And the last finding that we found was that the lack of improved sidewalk on the east side of North Camino del Corto disrupts the network for pedestrian accessibility. So considering the site settings, conditions, and the context of site's vicinity, staff finds that the implementation of conditions of approval engineering 3 through 11 are necessary to serve the public health, safety, and welfare. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission deny the applicant's request to remove conditions of approval engineering 3 through 11 and affirm those conditions unmodified. Staff's available to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Hirschbein.
Are there any guidelines within the city that equate scale or cost of imposing off-site improvements to the scale of the project being proposed?
I believe that there are guidelines that do take into account the extent of the cost of the improvements to the improvements being done on the site.
Because what troubles me about this is they're not constructing anything, and they're merely responding to a change in the city law to continue business as they had been. And now there's this extra, I think, pretty substantial cost being imposed. So what would those guidelines dictate when there's no real construction going on as part of the underlying project?
You know, I don't think we reviewed the cost associated with the project.
There is no cost.
Right. We didn't. What we did do is we looked to impose the ADA requirements of a site. So we require that a site meet ADA standards when a project's moving forward. And that's where the conditions came from.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I believe I can also chime in on this. We get back to our issue of nexus again, and nexus to impose these types of conditions. Our office was consulted on this item as well, and we believe that the conditions are appropriate here. This is not, widen the street because the general plan says we want the street widened. They're not those types of conditions. This is the repair conditions. Some of these conditions are fix what's broken out there, ADA access and compliance issues, pedestrian access issues. Also, even though they are not constructing anything new physically out there as part of this project, they are changing the use. It's going from timeshare to hotel, and we as staff discussed that as well. A hotel
I don't think it's timeshare. I think it's short-term rental.
Well, short-term rental to hotel.
And that's because there's a change in the city law.
Right. But to change that use to a hotel, you're going to be introducing a shorter-term, more diverse population. You may have more people with disability issues, access issues, things like that.
Why could you make that assumption?
Well, it seemed logical to us that with a hotel population, you're going to have more in and out activity than you will necessarily with a short-term rental, which could be more like 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Hotel occupancies could be less. That was our thought at the time. But more importantly, getting back to the actual conditions. Again, this was not, widen the street because it would be nice and it's based on the impact of the project. These are corrective issues. These were, again, ADA access, correct broken items. The sidewalk is an added improvement, but given the location, given the pedestrian access issues, we felt supportive of that condition, that be addressed. But again, it's ultimately the commission's decision how you want to handle it.
For clarity, are all the engineering requirements that are being contested in the public right-of-way, or are some of them on the property?
All the improvements are in the public right-of-way.
Thank you.
Commissioner Donovan.
I'm very familiar with that corner. I drive around it all the time. I share Mr. Hirschbein's concern. My question is, the sidewalk, really, it's in Old Las Palmas. Old Las Palmas doesn't have sidewalks. Hardly any place in the neighborhood has a sidewalk. This is sidewalk going nowhere, basically. Why is it just something the city decided because it would be a nice thing to have? I don't see where it where its current existence, its current status interrupts the flow of pedestrian traffic, because it's not like you're going from a sidewalk to a non-sidewalk to a sidewalk. There are no sidewalks when you go north and west of the site.
So one of the reasons we imposed a sidewalk was to have access from the parking lot to the actual buildings that are, or the commercial units that are in the front of the hotel. Currently, anyone that wants to access the commercial buildings has to travel through the breezeway of the hotel. I'm not certain if the breezeway then exits out into the public sidewalk. Anyone traveling from the parking lot has to go through the breezeway out to the front of the building through the private property, essentially.
Commissioner Gardner?
Yes. Time. Okay. Are there any, is there any time frame in which they have to have these improvements done?
I would, as far as engineering is concerned, I don't know of any time frame that we would be constrained by. I don't know if it's constrained by their approval of their land use or their CUP or anything like that. I would need to refer that back to planning to find out if there's a time frame related to their new change in use.
Thank you.
So just clarification from my institutional knowledge. If I remember correctly, we intensified the uses of the site, or we changed the use of the site from one of the retail had an art gallery and it moved into another use. Can you just reaffirm that?
Sure. That is actually Pamplemousse. It's a proposed cocktail lounge. And the zoning analysis conducted for this project determined that the use is going to be deficient by one parking space. However, we had a concerned residents who voiced the site's conditions, and the planning services the planning commission imposed a requirement for a specific parking plan, which the business owner is still waiting. They're just waiting for the outcome of this appeal to submit the final plan to the Department's planning services for further review.
And do we have, and this might be an engineering question, from that parking place, a path of travel for a handicapped person to the establishment? Because I think that's the question here, and I don't know as we have a path of travel from that parking space around the corner, because the parking space is not Via Lola, but the side street there.
Yes. Now, the parking lot itself, I believe, I've been told by looking at a site plan, also looking at a site plan, that there is access to the back of the hotel from the parking lot, but there is no access from the parking lot to what would be the Pamplemousse and the coffee shop and the other commercial elements around that are on Via Lola and Palm Canyon. So to answer your question, there is not a current path of travel from the parking lot to those commercial buildings without going through the hotel.
Another thing I might add, the current bay parking that's in the front, right now currently doesn't conform. There is no path of travel from those parking lots to the businesses. You would have to walk through a non-compliant sidewalk.
From where to where? Could you clarify that on a drawing?
Sure.
Could we see that?
Right. So you can, how do you highlight that? I don't know if you, there you go. So you can see here, this is the actual bay parking. The path of travel would typically be here to the businesses. That path of travel exceeds 2% current ADA standards. So
2% elevation change?
Cross slope. So part of our conditions is to address that issue.
And if this is a question for our attorney, Mr. Priest, so if we don't provide ADA compliant, we had this change, we intensified the use one, I'm not sure it's intensification, we changed the use of both the short-term rental to hotel, and also the use of the residential, if we don't, the commercial, if we don't provide the path of travel, are we not opening ourselves to liability? And secondly, if somebody were to get out of the car and trip and fall in the public right-of-way, are we not opening ourselves up to some sort of liability?
You know, hard to speculate, but it's possible.
Thank you.
I want to be clear. You want the 5-foot sidewalk on the Del Corto side, correct? And then if someone were leaving their car in the parking lot to go around to the Lola side, the Lola side doesn't have a sidewalk, does it?
We're requiring it.
Are you requiring, I thought you were just requiring you're requiring Del Corto and Lola all the way around?
That is correct. A continuous path of travel from the commercial buildings all the way around to the parking lot in the back.
And is the main entrance to the hotel then on the Lola side?
The applicant can confirm the information. However, according to the floor plan and the site plan that's submitted to the Planning Services Department, suggests that the building is accessible from West via Lola and then also from the rear facing the parking lot. But applicant is here, so they're able to confirm that.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to know which is used more frequently too, but we'll wait for the applicant.
Commercial Harshbein.
Do we know if there's any ADA compliant units in the proposed hotel rooms?
The applicant can confirm that information as well. However, for this change of use, they do have to do some internal upgrade to conform to certain requirements such as installation of fire sprinklers and so forth.
But not ADA?
The applicant can confirm.
No, I mean, would the city require that?
Typically, yes.
And so the access to those ADA units would be from Via Lola? That's what I'm asking. Is it from Via Lola? Well, that's what I'm asking.
The designated, I don't know if in the back there's designated ADA parking stalls, but in the front that is where the ADA parking stalls are designated.
I'm sorry, I didn't get you.
I'm not certain if in the parking lot there's an ADA dedicated parking stall.
But then you said something about the front.
The front has the ADA handicap parking stalls.
It has them now?
Yes.
In that bay?
You're looking at them right, yes.
In that bay parking?
Yes.
But you're saying it's non-compliant?
Correct. The path of travel is not compliant.
And if they comply with the engineering requirements, those bay spaces go away, right?
Not necessarily, no. They would reconfigure the driveway approach and create a 2 or 4 foot or 5 foot path of travel that would meet ADA requirements.
No, what I'm asking is, if they complied with those engineering requirements on Via Lola, would those bay parking spaces go away?
No.
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 So can you point out where this, just on that photograph, can you just go up there and point what you're asking them to do? Because now I'm very confused.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you understand?
This thing here.
I thought they.
Sidewalk is in the back of the stall.
Okay, let me point this out to you here. So in this area right here, this is your driveway approach that takes the vehicular access to the bay parking stall. What we're proposing is this approach right here, which is more than 2% cross slope, would be removed, and they would put in a new modified wedge curb along here, which would then lift this area, and then the cross slope could then be 2% for 5 feet wide, and then that would give us our ADA path of travel.
But they'd retain the bay parking.
Correct.
Okay, I thought the bay parking was in the right of way, but it's not.
No, that bay parking is okay.
It's on the property.
It's just the cross slope for the oops.
And how many ADA parking spaces are required?
That I'm not sure. I would have to refer that back to planning. There's a percentage of parking spaces or.
Could you do this modification just in front of the,
This wedge curb modification that I was just talking about would only be for the bay parking on Via Lola. The sidewalk would continue around the corner here with a handicap ramp, and then the sidewalk would continue all the way up Corto to their north property line. And these driveway approaches here would have to be modified to the new driveway standards, which would then become ADA compliant, and that sidewalk would go up to their next driveway approach, which is this location here, and it would terminate here. And you can see this bay parking here is not compliant either, but they're not what we're talking about today. And that would bring the entire parking area via Cordo and via Lola up to standard.
Commissioner Song,
Okay.
turn your
your mic.
Okay. So I think there's two things that we need to divide here. Okay. Via Lola, those handicap spaces, I believe that the code does not allow you, if you're a handicapped person, you can go behind your own car, but you cannot go behind somebody else's handicapped car. So what that means is that if there's 2 handicap units in this whole entire required by the building code, then you need to have 2 handicap parking stalls. According to whatever that math is, we need to provide that number of handicap stalls. And it could be that there's 1 in the back parking because it's closest to that handicap unit from the back of the building, or it's really close to where Via Lola is. From what I'm hearing, because of the number of series of applications and the applicant had to go through, even though right now it's a question to just the staff, I believe the way that I'm thinking about this is that we should definitely meet the handicap requirements of the handicap stalls to the entrance of the building, which is Via Lola. And then the rest, I think we should keep it as it is of the neighborhood, that people do walk, able people do walk on streets. I think we should keep those 2 things separately. If my other colleagues want to go through the whole improvement, obviously that's your opinion, but I think meeting the federal requirements for handicap on Via Lola, I think that's something that we have to do. The other part, I don't think it's important.
could you limit the work to just to the 2 parking spaces? Or would it have to be the whole area?
It all depends on the number of units, handicap units that they are required to provide and the handicap spaces that they're required to provide. So was it 70 units? Is that what it is?
17.
17?
The total unit is 35 right now at the Twist, and 17 of them is going to be converted to hotel.
But I think by code, you're required to have 5% on this, so what
The
is that?
number of required handicap spaces depends on the number of parkings that is provided at the site. As you may recall, the off-street parking is legal non-conforming. However, based on the units, the code would require 58 parking spaces. So based on the number 58, there will be 3 handicap parking spaces that will be required. However, the parking is legal non-conforming right now, and the site provides 45 spaces, which excludes the 5 spaces on the Camino del Corto, just for clarification. So that will require 2 spaces.
And they could be accommodated in the parking lot, though, couldn't they?
Yeah, 2 and 1 in the back.
Yeah.
Where that unit is.
Commissioner Gardner.
I feel like we're getting into discussion.
I know, it's
So,
just that.
but question is, who uses that parking lot? Can you remind me? Is this only for the Twist, or is it for the surrounding businesses?
Based on the information that, and then based on the staff's understanding, is that there is no signage or anything that specifically states that the parking is for the Twist tenants only, and it is accessible to other people, but according to the applicant, the parking lot is mostly used by the Twist visitors and the tenants. So there's no physical barrier or any mechanism that would check and confirm who's using the parking.
Let me clarify, for our parking code, the parking spaces at the rear of the property on Camino del Corto are intended to serve the entire building.
Okay. If it's intended to serve the entire building, I'm guessing that there's probably a concern with cost in fixing all of these. Can the cost be shared with the other businesses if they're benefiting from the parking?
It would be the property owner who would be responsible for that.
And so it's up to them how they work out
Correct.
things with the rest of the people?
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Maruzzi.
I just noticed when I look at the photograph, it looks like there are 3 handicap parking spaces. I guess we can confirm that, but 1, 2, 3. I see them on Villalobos. I have very sharp eyes.
But they're non-compliant.
Okay, they're not good. Are there any more questions of staff at this point? Hearing none. Is the applicant present? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing, and you're going to have 10 minutes to speak, and then you'll have 2 minutes for rebuttal after we hear from the audience.
Hi, can you hear this?
No, hold on just a minute. Let me turn it on.
Hi, thanks for hearing the appeal today. And first, I'll just clarify a couple of the questions that I heard while we were there. The switch to a The switch to a hotel from vacation rentals is purely a regulatory decision. There is no change in the operation. So with the 17 vacation rentals, it is short-term, and it's the exact same population that will have the hotel. It was only in terms of trying to comply with the city and the ever-changing rules for vacation rentals. Also, just quickly, you're wondering where the ADA unit is for the hotel. And it is right next to the handicap spots on Villalobos.
Is it
so it's
103?
about 10 feet away.
Is it 103?
103. So it's the ideal spot, by far. So with that, I'll just back up a little bit in terms of some of the history there with the parking. I purchased the building in 2012, and it was most of you know, in derelict state. The neighbors were tired of the hardscape and just the ugliness of the back of the property that went into Old Las Palmas. And so Jackie Autry and Jim Newman, who were two of the neighbors that faced the parking lot, they petitioned the city and the prior owner to put in landscaping and soften it to make it look better. No one responded to them. They actually did it on their own, but there was no irrigation system. And then after purchasing the property in 2012, we went ahead and we put in an irrigation system and added additional landscaping in the back to further soften it, and added the ficus trees and everything else. And along with that too, we did a full renovation, not only of the interior of the property, but also of the exterior and then the grounds. And in the parking lot, we resurfaced the parking lot on the Del Corte side and added ADA units. And that was in 2013. In 2014, we did the restaurant build out for what was formerly Dish at 1107 North Palm Canyon. To get the permits to do that, for the restaurant, the city made us move our ADA spots from the Del Corto parking lot over to the Villalobos parking lot. So on the Villalobos parking lot, those were the 8 most popular spots. There were 8 spots there. We converted 4 of those into 3 ADA units. We hired J.H. Thompson. They worked with the permitting process in terms of making sure that the ADA spots were compliant. We demolitioned the blacktop, put in the cement, all the signage, and all the spacing. So having the new requirement that the slope is wrong, I'm not sure if that was a change since 2013, but we paid, and I have actually the invoice in there you can see in terms of J.H. Thompson in your packet. We paid actually to have the ADA spots leveled so that there was no slope for the people parking, and then the slope only went to the street. So I don't know if there's been a change since that, but we were compliant, and we moved those spots over to the Villola side. Since that time, at the Villola side, the ADA spots are almost never used. I mean, rarely will you ever see a car in there. No one on site has ever seen a wheelchair. We welcome it, but it's just those spots are not used. For people that are not using the ADA spots, and also for the ADA spots, if they do use it, they have full access into the twist. There's a breezeway right that goes next to 103. They also have full access going along Villola and to Palm Canyon to the commercial spots. For people that use the non-ADA spots, they can either park on the Villola side if there's an open spot, or if they park on Camino del Corto in that lot, they have two options for going into the twist or to the commercial spaces. One is there's a breezeway that goes directly into the property. In the photo that you saw there, that goes out to the pool, and a sidewalk that runs around to Villola. There's also a back entrance going into the restaurant that you can go directly in from that spot. And then people also we have an easement between our property and the property just to the north of us, that the property owner to the north of us put a chain across so there's no traffic, there's no cars that can drive on our easement. But people can also walk directly to Palm Canyon from that spot. And so we see that too. But often it's either the breezeway or it's going directly on the easement. So there is no one that we see that parks in Camino del Corte lot and then walks along Camino del Corte around Villola, the backside of the property, to go visit Ernest Coffee or any of those other establishments. So from that standpoint, we don't think that this is solving any sort of problem. Also, when purchasing the property, it's a large property that on the front, it's very commercial on North Palm Canyon. And our thought was to keep it very commercial and to fit with the neighborhood. However, on the backside, on the west side of the property, it's a quiet, beautiful neighborhood with a ton of vegetation. And so we tried to transition the property from the front, which is commercial, to the back, which is the neighborhood. And so we've done our best to try to fit into the neighborhood with the vegetation, with the quiet, section of the building, all the commercial stuff, toward the front. And we think we hit our mark because our neighbors have been very, very pleased with us. In fact, when they found out about the sidewalk going in, they spoke up, quite adamantly in terms of not wanting the hardscape, and no one would use the sidewalk. The neighbor directly who butts the parking lot, his name's Michael Evans. He stated emphatically, look, I do not want more hardscape there. I want the landscaping and keep it soft and make it mesh with the neighborhood. Also, Jim Newman, who a letter I think is in your packet that you have, wrote a 2-page letter in terms of really his strong feelings that additional hardscape back there is really destroying the neighborhood and not in tune with Old Las Palmas. And then finally, the head of the Old Las Palmas Neighborhood Association, Dan Kaiser, voted similar or stated similar sentiments too in emails and spoke up very strongly in terms of keeping the landscaping, and they don't want to turn the backside into a commercial area. So just in conclusion then too, when we were at the city council meeting, the Planning Commission at the time had stated that there is leeway in terms of applying these rules regarding sidewalk, and that they can offer a waiver if the sidewalk's in a residential area. And this is the perfect example of it being in a residential area. And, as stated by the commissioner, that people walk in Old Las Palmas
on the streets and not on the sidewalks there, because there aren't sidewalks. And I don't think that the people in Old Las Palmas want sidewalks going through that neighborhood anyway. So with that, open to questions or whatever the procedure.
Thank you. So we're going to hear from the public at this point, and then after that, you'll have 2 minutes for a rebuttal. But hold on to see if there's anyone here from the public. Is there anyone here from the public to speak? No. So you can just stay right there. And then are there any questions of the applicant at this point? Commissioner Song.
Hi. Pretend for a moment that you could provide. Pretend for a moment that you're required to have 3 handicap parking spaces. Okay, on the twist.
Yes.
Okay. Pretend 2 of them were in the back parking, and 1 of them was off of Via Lola. Okay, and the back parking, you just have to restripe, make sure that a handicapped person is able to have a pathway through your back gate and so on to access their unit. What do you think about that? What are the complications?
It makes no sense at all.
Okay, tell me how it makes no sense.
Because the handicap unit is 103, which is right next to where the 3 handicap spots are on Via Lola. Also, to go through the back, there are steps going down.
Oh, I see.
From the back parking lot. So there would be no reason for a handicapped person to choose to park on Camino del Corte. The only reason they would choose there is if maybe they're going to the Westin or maybe they're, want to go for a walk or stroll in the neighborhood. But otherwise, you have better access to all of the commercial establishments and to the hotel from the Via Lola side.
Right. I think the issue is that the location of the handicap parking spaces on Via Lola is perfect. It's just that you don't have a legal sidewalk that connects. Even though you worked on all the improvements and the slopes and so on, the sidewalk in the back is too steep. There should really be a sidewalk on the toe side, on the front side of the stalls, that connects to the rest of your site. I was just trying to sort of divide and conquer rather than, have it all in once. Okay, thank you.
So I have a couple questions. We don't have a letter from Mr. Jim Newman in our packet.
Oh.
Just as an FYI, so.
Sorry about that. Oh, it is. There, you can get this.
Oh, thanks.
If you can read that or not.
I can read the summary if that's helpful.
Summary would be good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just because you put it into the record and we don't have it in the record, so this enters it into the record.
Okay, in conclusion, and again, this is Jim Newman, who is a resident of Old Las Palmas, and his home is on Camino del Corte in the corner of Camino Sur. In conclusion, the adding of more concrete to the Camino del Corte block, in addition.
Wait, hold on just a second. No, there you go.
Okay. In conclusion, the adding of more concrete to the Camino del Corte block, in addition to being totally unnecessary and costly to the twist, would be substantially reduce the neighborhood feeling that the twist has tried to maintain along the back of their property. In the interest of a very large expenditure and to blend into a mixed-use area, it seems to me that these additional funds could be more wisely spent maintaining and beautifying their facilities to the financial benefit to city tax revenue through continued and enhanced occupancy. Please allow the twist to leave the Camino del Corte block as it is presently. We have more important issues impacting our neighborhood, and the city generally than to make unreasonable requests to merchants and businesses who have fueled the present dramatic growth of our communities and the city generally. He actually has a lot more better points, I think, in other paragraphs, but
That's good, and it may have been there, I just missed it on that. The other question is, if just for my clarification, I'm not completely clear on this, if you park, there's no handicap parking spaces in the back lot.
That's correct.
All the handicap parking spaces are in Via Lola.
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Gardner.
I actually have another question for staff. Apologies. There's additional item that was here, and there's Assembly Bill number 1358. Can someone speak to that? Because we received it, but nobody's mentioned anything about it.
One of the requests that we had from a member of the Planning Commission was to provide any language that there might be in state law about complete street requirements. And so it was at the request of a planning commissioner that you've received that information.
Great, thank you.
And can we just talk to that a moment about complete streets and how this affects this project or doesn't affect this project?
Just for the general public, the term complete street means that the public right-of-way is available to all forms of transportation, not just vehicles, but also pedestrians, bicycles, et cetera. And so when designing streets, we should take all of those forms of transportation into mind. One of the things that the city has done recently with the adoption of the Section 14 plan, we require complete streets in Section 14. We have not extended those requirements yet to other areas of the city, but still it's important to be mindful that we need to make sure that there's safe passage for pedestrians and bicycles in addition to considering the needs of vehicles.
Thank you. Additional questions? Okay, if that's the case, I will close the public hearing and I'll open it for commission discussion. Thank you very much for coming up. Commissioner Hirschbein.
I'm very uncomfortable requiring the applicant to modify the project or the area around the project at this time. If he was building something, remodeling something, adding on to something, I could see triggering these sorts of requirements, but I don't know what the rules were in 2013, but obviously it went through plan check, it went through the city engineering department, and he got approved and he built it in good faith that it would last longer than 6 years. All of this is being triggered by a law passed by council that a building can't house short-term rentals anymore. A multi-tenant building can't house short-term rentals anymore. And, excuse me, sorry. And that has nothing to do with any action the applicant took. So he's doing everything to comply with that law by changing it to a hotel use. It doesn't change the function of the building at all. I just think it's unfair. I think he's not a, he's not a major corporation. He's not one house, but it's not a. I don't think the guy, it's not a person with deep pockets. And I just think it's overreach on the part of the city to require that.
Commissioner Gardner.
Again, I had another question for staff. Could the city have reached out to the Twist and made the same request even if the change had not occurred? Is that something that the city can decide on its own, that certain properties need to make changes?
Changes of this nature, generally not. It's something that would require as a condition of project approval. The applicant wants to make this change to the project, and so staff has suggested imposing these conditions. And again, the question that the commission has to decide here is, the scope of those requirements. Are they reasonable relative to the application, et cetera? And so that's before the commission.
Thank you.
Commissioner Donnefeld.
I totally agree with Mr. Hirschbein. I couldn't have said it any better. I think, and I don't think it meets the nexus test, Jim. I really don't. I think this applicant had to comply with the change in the law. He did nothing to change the facility whatsoever other than the use. And I think, well, it no longer became, those 17 units had to become daily rentals as opposed to long-term rentals. short-term rentals. So I think it's an overreach, and I would vote against the recommendation of the staff.
Commissioner Gardner.
I understand what you're both saying, and I think that that is unfortunate. ADA law has changed, changes quite a bit, and we're always trying to accommodate people in new ways. And I think making sure that we're compliant with the ADA is important. The other thing is that we have more development in that area, and that there are people who are going to use that back area. I know that when I park at Ernest, if I have to park in the back, I wouldn't have thought to walk through, I would have gone around. I'm willing to concede to the sidewalk, but I think the ADA requirements need to be met. And unfortunately, the laws change and people have to comply with them all the time. That's just the way it is.
And if I could just chime in a moment, when you have a short-term vacation rental, you do not have to apply, my understanding is, with ADA requirements. But when you have a hotel, you do have to comply with ADA requirements. So there's a difference, and although they could have, they were operating kind of on the border of legality, they decided to go towards a hotel, which does require ADA requirements. And it sounds like, if I'm hearing everything right, they even had to do some of the rooms to be ADA compliant, where they weren't compliant before. I think the question, it seems like the question that's before us is the ADA has changed, and that's triggering a bit of a change. Is that true that's triggering the change, or what's triggering the change?
So the application for the change in use is what triggered the change, and then the change then filters down to what is new ADA rules, what are new requirements, and that's what we were imposing.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Song.
But at the end of the day, this is also an apartment housing project. Apartment housing projects do require handicap accessibility parking spaces. So handicap rules have not changed for handicap spaces. The requirement of the 2% cross slope and 5% on a sidewalk has remained since 1971, when the first ADA laws came through. So I think what we're saying here is that we're in complete agreement. We love what you have done on this project. I'm glad you brought it back. There's excessive amount of requirements that has been asked, but when it comes to the handicap spaces, I mean, the applicant stated here that he's done everything by the rules. I don't know if there's record in the city that there was civil plans or partial grading plans that showed that what he had improved there was exactly the same. Honestly, I doubt it. The public works of the city of Palm Springs is pretty tough. So I don't know what happened, but those spaces are not compliant. And I think they should be compliant, as Grace has mentioned. The rest of the continuous sidewalk and so on, from able bodies be able to get from the back parking, I think that's something that we can definitely agree with the applicant. But the handicap spaces, also, it's to protect the applicant as well, because there are those people who are so happy, and we have all heard those kinds of cases.
Commissioner Hirschbein, did you have a question? Or a comment, sorry.
I understand what you're saying, but let's assume for a minute that the applicant back in 2013 submitted plans, they showed the slope, and were approved, and then they were built per the drawings, and they were signed off by Public Works. Let's assume that. Now, 6 years later, we're telling the guy to rip it out because the city made a mistake? That doesn't seem fair to me. It's like 2 bites at the apple. I don't think we get that.
Oh, did they make a mistake?
I don't know.
Okay, let's let's ask staff that. Do you know the answer to that question? Because I think you've been here long enough to might remember.
I did my research when we were conducting these conditions, and there wasn't anything in our records to show that there was any drawings or civil drawings showing those spaces there. It doesn't mean that they weren't done as part of a planning application or some kind of a building permit application when they were doing upgrades to their building. It just means that they were not presented to engineering.
Commissioner Gardner, did you have a question or a comment? Sorry, we're in discussion.
Right. I completely understand I think that it needs to be done, but if it was the city's fault, then that's another layer to this, and that has to be discussed. But if it doesn't seem to be the city's fault.
Well, you don't know that.
Right, or we just don't know. We just don't know. I guess I am curious, just from the applicant's perspective, if we were to say, we just want you to comply with the ADA fixes, is that something that you're willing to do? Would you work with us on that?
I will. I mean, we want to do what's right, and obviously we want to be able to accommodate ADA. It is frustrating, though, after, in 2014, when we redid the lot and actually had the earth-moving equipment in there to flatten it. And the architect was Humayun Moaven, who was from Architectron, who did work in Palm Springs. And unfortunately, he was killed by a drunk driver about 2 years later, so we can't go back and talk to him on his filings, and it's created an issue for us. But the contractor was J.H. Thompson, who I included in the deck too. So at the time, it's his responsibility with all of the filings, and he had handled DISH, and we pulled a ton of permits from everything. He was very particular about every aspect, whether it be the grease trap, hood, you name it. And that was a very big project, putting that in. So he was the one who was adamant that we needed to comply with the ADA and move our spots from the backside, over to the Via Lola, which we knew, wasn't ideal for us because those were very popular spots, but we complied. And so if he did not have the permits for that, that would be a big surprise given the whole project that was being evaluated. And those spots had to be part of the approval of the restaurant too, because that was something, that was mandated. So.
Commissioner Maruzzi.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, if I might just suggest, based on the discussions of the Planning Commission and the interest in trying to address the ADA requirements for the interest of public safety, what you might consider is keeping conditions 3 through 5, which addresses ADA on Via Lola where the space is, and then deleting conditions 6 through 11. And again, just a suggestion based on your discussion.
If anyone agrees with that, I would take a motion from the floor.
That was exactly the motion I was going to make.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Is there a second to the motion? There's no second to that motion. Okay, hearing no second, is there an alternative motion?
I'll make.
I guess, go ahead if you wanted.
Try this one. I'm going to vote to accept the appeal as submitted and eliminate the engineering 3 through 11.
Is there a second to that motion?
No.
I will second it.
Okay, we have a first and a second to the motion, which is to eliminate all of the conditions that the applicant is requesting. Is there any discussion? Okay, hold on, Commissioner, do you want to read it? Commissioner Gardner.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused about what was happening because I still wanted to discuss what was going on. So I probably should have seconded your motion. I guess at this point, we're just voting on.
Well, if this motion fails, if this motion is approved, it's passed. If the motion fails, there can be an alternative motion.
Okay.
Commissioner Maruzzi, I think, is taking a minute before we.
So we're recommending the removal of all conditions, engineering 3 through 11? Is that what we're saying?
That's my
This is the
motion.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, hearing no more discussion, let's call for the question. Motion fails. Is there an alternative motion we want to put forward?
Okay, so now I'm clear, I'm sorry. Yeah, I want to make a motion that we require, is it 3 through 5? 3 through 5, but not the others.
So it would be granting the appeal in part with
Yes.
this motion.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Okay, now we're open for discussion. We have a first and we have a second.
One comment on that, I understand why this appeal is being made, but I do feel in general that we need to be thinking more about sidewalks and access in our downtown area. This isn't directly within the neighborhood, it's very close to Palm Canyon, it's just one street over. So in general, I don't want businesses to think that we're just gonna say we can't, that it's okay to not have a sidewalk. We really do want to start thinking about having sidewalks as we become more of a walking city.
I don't want
Commissioner
to
Manifold.
belabor this, but I want it to be clear to the other commissioners. The reason, I agree with Grace, I agree with everybody about that these are important parts of a city infrastructure, but this particular case is not being, this particular applicant isn't being treated fairly because of the kind of change he came before us was so minor and had to be done to comply with an ordinance that he had nothing to do with. And we have a nexus requirement in the state. There's got to be some reasonable relationship between what we're seeking and what benefit he's getting. I don't see the connection. So it's not because I don't think we should have sidewalks. It's not because I don't think we should be ADA compliant. But in this particular case, I just don't think the facts merit this kind of relief.
I wanted to add a little bit to the discussion. The engineering department, if you do move to go with only engineering conditions 3 to 5 and not 6 to 7, we would prefer those conditions be deferred to a covenant. The street is not to the ultimate width. Those parking side parallel parkings are within the public right-of-way. We do have, the city does have an ADA transition plan where we get opportunities to incrementally improve the ADA conditions of the city. As this is a conditional use permit, this is the opportunity we had to incrementally improve ADA conditions, especially this location. So we engineering department feels strongly that we should defer these to a covenant.
Let me make sure that I'm clear because
I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, we have a motion on the, I just want to make sure, I think your point is very well made, excuse me. I just want to be clear and let me maybe ask a question to be clear. Are you looking for all the conditions as a covenant or the 3 that we're proposing? Just explain, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm looking for, if the commission chooses to go with conditions, engineering conditions 3 to 5 to impose them as part of the conditions and defer engineering 6 through 11 to a covenant.
Well, what does that mean, defer to a covenant?
Got it.
Perhaps I can explain. Oftentimes, when you're doing sidewalk improvements, street improvement stuff, you want to do them as one unified project. But as projects get improved on a block over time, you may only be getting conditions on certain projects at certain times. So rather than make this project put in the sidewalk here and this project put in the sidewalk here, and you may end up with a bit of a mishmash, it's not uncommon that the engineering department will say, these are conditions of approval. You will sign a covenant agreeing to do these when we ask you to. So the requirement is deferred so that maybe 3 or 4 years down the line when the city goes, okay, it's time to do Via Lola now. You've got all those conditions and covenants in place so that the city's got the legal rights to go in and start doing those improvements and getting the developer to pay for those costs or have the developer do it themselves under city supervision.
But does the guy next door have to pay for them, or does he not have to pay for them because he didn't have the?
If they didn't develop a project or get any conditions of approval, then that one property probably wouldn't have any sort of covenants or conditions on it. But to the extent there are other projects on that block that do have conditions that are deferred, the city can then utilize those at the time that the city is going to do that larger project.
You're saying ultimately, if you want a covenant from the owner, that at the appropriate time when the city deems it appropriate to do the other changes, that he would agree at that time, whether it's 5 years from now, 6, whatever, to pay for them.
Yes.
Well, that just goes against everything we're just
I don't
talking
agree
about.
with that.
Well, deferral of conditions like this, and engineering can speak more to this, but deferral of conditions like this is pretty common.
But that's if you have a project. There's no project here.
Well, and that's the question before the commission.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good. Hearing that extra information, does the maker of the motion want to change their motion or leave their motion as is? So the question is, the conditions you did not mention, do you want to defer them through a covenant to some future date?
I guess my question is, when would that future date
No
be?
one knows.
We don't know.
No one
Whatever they
knows.
call it.
May never happen.
I honestly don't know.
Mr. Chair, I was just speaking with engineering staff a second ago. If the motion is for just conditions 3 through 5, my understanding is those conditions would not be deferred. Those
That's
are
correct.
ADA, those would happen right away. It's the other ones that would be deferred.
I wouldn't support that change. I would stick with the original motion. That's how I'm going to vote.
Let's stick with the original motion. I think overall, yes, I understand we had to move to this for reasons that were kind of out of the control of the business owner. So let's just stick with the original.
Okay, any more comments between us? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Can we repeat the motion just so we're clear?
Right. Just to clarify for the record, the motion on the table and seconded currently is to grant the appeal in part, keeping conditions engineering 3 through 5 in place, not deferred. They would be done at the time of the project there. Engineering conditions 6 through 11 would be deleted.
Okay, vote up. Just vote.
But the conditions 3 to 5 apply to the frontage on Via Lola where the bay parking are located, not the entire Via Lola.
Well, whatever the conditions say on there.
It's the language of the conditions it's more encompassing, where I believe the motion maker was talking about the bay parking handicap space stretch of Via Lola.
Is that not what engineering 3 says? The existing driveway approach used for bay parking does not meet current ADA. Remove existing approach, construct new modified driveway. So I believe that's limited to just the bay parking area. It doesn't go completely down Lola. And then 4 and 5 are basically, repair broken items.
Okay, let's vote. The motion passes, just like before. I want to thank you for coming up and saying that you'd be happy to do ADA. I think it really is in your best interest. We really appreciate what you're doing at the Twist. I think the Twist is an incredibly successful project. I see it on Airbnb all the time, and I wish you continued success with it. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is a new business. Item 4A. Yes, would you like to take a break? Okay, we'll take a comfort break until, let's say, 10 after. How are you holding up?
I'm freezing in here. It's always freezing. Absolutely need to bring a coat. They at least able to watch, so they're fine with it. I mean, everyone's okay. Okay, let's go. I'd like to call the meeting back to order for the Planning Commission. The next item is item 4A, new business. Asia San Francisco Palm Springs LLC for a land use permit amendment to modify the hours and operations of the outdoor entertainment musicians that are permitted as an accessory use to a restaurant located at 1555 South Palm Canyon Drive. This is the former Hacienda site. With that, can we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners. This item is a site located at 1555 South Palm Canyon Drive. It is the former Hacienda Cantina. It is and located within the Plaza del Sol Shopping Center. So what you have here on the screen is the overall site of the shopping center, surrounded by Bellardo Road to the west and south, East Morongo Road to the north, South Palm Canyon Drive to the east. The project is on the bottom right of the screen, the northeast corner of the site. So this is the existing developed conditions that you see here on the screen. The restaurant is at the corner, and then they have the pool, cabanas, restrooms, and outdoor lawn and bocce ball court. The applicant intends to modify that outdoor space by removing the bocce ball courts you see here. There's a lawn area proposed in place of those bocce ball courts, and really retaining the rest of the site as you see it here on the plan. Staff, as I said, this has some history for this site. It was originally approved back in 2013 to modify the outdoor pool area, or to improve that outdoor pool area. And it was, Hacienda Cantina began operating in that location in June of 2014 through January of 2016. So the applicant before you is requesting to modify the approval that was granted to the cantina. They are seeking to extend the operational hours from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. They, in an effort to address some of the noise concerns that were previously, we received previously from the prior operator, or at least from the neighbors around there, they have removed the speakers that were elevated above the pool area, and they also intend to operate the site differently than was previously done. They are primarily looking to have weddings and corporate events within that space. So the hours would change from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. is what they are requesting. Staff has prepared conditions of approval to approve the land use permit for Planning Commission consideration. So what you see here on the screen are some recommendations that we have. So we are requesting similar conditions that were imposed in the prior land use permit, as well as some additional conditions that were imposed for another outdoor event venue, the Infusion Beach, located on North Palm Canyon Drive. So what you see here are some additional requirements related to sound limiters being installed as a part of the sound system for the site. Limiting the decibel and hertz, as you see in the second item related to the sound limiter. Prohibiting subwoofers as a part of the project operation. Directing speakers inward to the site and away from residential areas. And also doing sound monitoring station if necessary to ensure that there are no conflicts with the noise ordinance. Staff would also suggest that the commission impose a requirement that this item be reviewed, a report be provided to the Planning Commission 6 months after the date the operation starts. So those are some of the things that we have recommended in attachment 2 to your report. Staff has prepared a resolution for your consideration outlining the history for this site as well as the conditions that we have recommended today. Staff has prepared findings in support of it as well. And the only other thing I'd also like to add is that the additional materials that you have received as a part of your packet today at the dais is we did receive 2 emails in opposition to this proposed change. And the applicant has also provided the business disclosure form, which indicates those with a financial interest of 5% or more. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. The applicant is also here and has also provided, as you heard, additional testimony at the beginning of the meeting on their requests, and I'll conclude there. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Gardner?
I just see that you mentioned Infusion Beach Club and making similar requirements for them. Do you know what complaints, if any, have been made about Infusion? How has that been going?
I'm not sure the history on it in terms of the entirety of its operation. I don't think it's open yet, but this was really just measures that we saw or we had analyzed as being adequate for.
Infusion's not open yet?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I think I must have been thinking of a different property then.
But great, Commissioner Gardner, if I can just help with that a little bit. However, we imposed the same conditions on Colony 29, which is very close by, and I think, how is Colony 29? Do we have any feedback on that?
I haven't had any complaints yet.
So I think it's the same conditions that we put on Colony 29 that we put on Infusion Beach. So Commissioner Donenfeld.
David, I have one question is, I thought that when one of the applicants had made a presentation earlier at the public comment, they had mentioned that we weren't permitting live music. That doesn't seem to be the case. It would be either live or recorded music. Is that not correct?
Thank you, Commissioner Donenfeld. Yeah, so if you look at page 2 of the conditions for LUP 19063, which was attached to the resolution, you'll see condition number 5 that talks about the permit authorizing live bands and DJs, but it does limit it from 8 to 6 p.m. They can have outdoor DJs until 10 p.m., But if we want to modify that, we could have bands as well until 10 p.m., but it's at the discretion of the Planning Commission.
If we made all of the technology measuring and limiting the level of music apply to live musicians who might bring their own equipment on site, their own speakers, whatever, if we required the same limitations that we're requiring to the disc jockey, to anyone who would bring in their own equipment, would there really be a difference? Because I can see where an event, particularly a wedding or something like that, would be enhanced so much more with live as opposed to recorded music, as long as we're guaranteed that the technology is going to be the same in terms of limiting the level and distancing of the sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. It just comes down to the enforcement and how that occurs. And that's where the challenge lies, is managing the applicant when they have their a contract with someone else, that person knows that these requirements are in place.
And we could make it would be a condition that no one would be given entertainment opportunities on site unless they were subject to the same sound restrictions.
Yeah, it's something that we could impose.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marizzi.
I just had a question about the 6 months review. Would that be a staff review, or would it be staff in planning, or who would review?
So generally what that means is when after they've been operating for 6 months, staff would check in with the applicant to see how it is going. We would also do get the police reports that we've gotten from the police department and report that information back to the Planning Commission as just basically a staff memo.
Okay, so in the past, when we've imposed that 6-month review, I understand infusion hasn't started yet. There was this other one that's been operating. Was it 6 months? Did we require that?
29.
I believe we did require a 6
Was that 6 months ago?
Yeah, that it's been less than 6 months.
Oh, less than 6 months. So at 6 months, you will be bringing that back to us?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we actually did that with the cantina when it was operating. We did a report in a year, and that's how the commission was, at that time, the commission was informed of the significant noise complaints we had received from that business.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Gardner? Nothing? It's my understanding, just Colony 29s had been operating under similar conditions before we even imposed the conditions. And if I remember correctly, they had very little objection to the conditions because we had imposed them before. It was also my understanding that when it was the cantina, and I just want to confirm, had very large, high speakers that blasted a lot of music relatively intensely, and that this operation, I think I heard the applicant say that they've removed those speakers, which means speakers that are brought in are going to be much lower to the ground and obviously more dispersed versus trying to blast music. Is that your understanding?
Correct, and they also have to limit the sound waves so that it's minimizing the travel.
Traffic that goes away. Thank you very much.
And they won't be facing west. The speakers will be facing Palm Canyon.
Yes, correct.
That's better because it bounces off.
Commissioner Gardner?
So another question is, I know there's a subcommittee looking at our noise ordinance right now. So if we were to approve this, once that noise ordinance is passed, and if there's any discrepancies, does that change anything? Or are they allowed to keep this for the 6 months? How does it work?
They would be subject to these conditions of approval. One of the things I might mention is looking at condition of approval number 7, which references the city's noise ordinance. Mm-hmm. What we might do, instead of putting the specific decibel level limits, is we might just reference that the applicant shall adhere to the city's noise ordinance. So if there's any changes to the noise ordinance, they're subject to whatever the new requirements are. So that's one of the things I would recommend, but otherwise they'd be subject to the other conditions that you all impose on the application.
The main one being the extension of time.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
So the conditions that they're asking relief from, were they conditions of the cantina or of the hotel project that we approved, or both?
From the cantina. So the cantina was limited to 6 p.m.
6 p.m. And what do you recall what we approved for the hotel? Because that was such a long, drawn-out we beat that one to death. Can we go back to those conditions?
Those conditions, actually, I think were less stringent than the ones you have before you. So those ones were more, they were not as explicit as these are in terms of the monitoring and the limitations. So I think the ones from the hotel were more about the sound not being regulated through actual decibels and things like that. It was more about how the sound appeared to the common ear.
And what about hours? What were the hours on that one?
They were still only 8 to 6, as far as in my recollection.
At the hotel?
Yeah.
And then, but one thing I do remember, because Kathy was beating this one up, about because the speakers were high, and that was perceived as one of the generating factors of the sound going out to the neighborhood. I don't see anything in here about the height of the speakers. Can we add that? Or am I missing it?
That was, I think, in response to what they had installed at the site previously.
Right.
But yeah, we can add a condition if the commission, at the commission's pleasure, to limit.
And can we just match whatever we did on the hotel? I don't know, did it say a foot off the ground? I mean, I don't remember what it was, but I do remember there was something specific about that.
I can look through the history and before you take action today.
Because I'd like to make sure that anything we put in effect for the hotel, if it's not in these comment or conditions, get added to it if it's more stringent than what's already in here. And so if you could review those and add those, if necessary, I'd be more inclined to vote for it, because we opined on this for endless hours, and I don't want to just have to go through that again, and I don't want to throw away the good work we did on it as well.
For a question I'm sorry.
I don't recall spending that great deal of time on the hotel, because I think the Infusion Beach Club is what really has now sort of become our standard for regulating noise issues on applications, because it was going to be a hotel pool. It wasn't going to be a special event pool anymore. He was converting it to a hotel use. So I didn't think the chances of there being loud screaming parties were nearly as feasible as they were when Hacienda was in business. That's my recollection. Well, we'll find out.
But we did impose certain requirements.
We might have, but I think the beach club was the most, Infusion was the most strict we've ever imposed. Because we have monitors and all kinds of things we never had before.
Commissioner Song.
Because of the good work that you have done, I'm wondering also with this with this set of corrections, this is a couple of things that I would like to ask or consider. On the periodic review, I know we say 6 months, and I know you mentioned that if we want to change that periodic review, we can also ask the applicant and also come up with a new plan. But on the sound monitoring, where it says also periodic operational review hearings, we should also set up a time definition so that you know what that periodic review is. And we can ask the applicant a little bit more, but I'm guessing it's not like they're gonna bring a tape to you and say, okay, this is a level. They're gonna bring you a report. So my thought is that on 18 and 19, if we have those data a little sooner than 6 months or 1 year, then we can have more data so that other similar future projects could also apply to, maybe we being too restringent and maybe all these features that we're doing are working, and therefore we can come up with a more balanced requirement. Because I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but it's sort of that on the previous projects, because we didn't have these requirements, we had these explosive sounds. Now we are putting these requirements together, but we don't have clearly, other than no complaint, that those requirements have been working out just fine. But now with this one, if we can have the information a little more often and a little more sooner, we can see if it's working or if it's not working.
Let me, before we go there, because I'd like to get, that's a great discussion point. Is there any more questions of staff at this point?
Number 15 for these sound limiters, to Commissioner Donenfeld's point, can those be, those can be imposed on any other equipment that's brought in by live, by musicians? Does it, because it goes through the central system, or because the musician would have that as part of his system?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, so the musician might bring in a speaker, right, an amplifier, play guitar, there's sound coming out of it. How does that amplifier get folded into this sound limiter requirement?
Yeah, it can be hard to regulate that.
I would assume that the sound system that was in place on site, that was fixed, could then be accessed by visiting musicians.
I don't know.
And their own instruments. Maybe our applicants can tell us that. Is that
Chair,
right?
you might
They're
check
shaking
with
their
the
heads yes.
So the applicant is here, but I just wanted to see if there are more questions of
Oh.
staff, and then.
Okay, we can ask.
All right. So if there's no question, do we want to open it up to the applicant? Do we have questions? Okay, would you mind coming forward and stating your name again for the record, and then being available to answer some questions?
I'm welcome to Aaron Nelson. Hi. And I do have Audrey Joseph still with me here. I know she's kind of more of an expert in technical sound stuff, but I can probably answer most of the questions. Go ahead. Yeah.
Did you hear them, or do you want us to repeat them? Commissioner Hirschbein, do you want to ask your question again?
Excuse me, so you're a sound engineer, is that correct?
No, she is.
No, I'm not a sound engineer per se. I have built a ton of venues in California, and I'm a sound expert, and I was an expert for the Entertainment Commission in San Francisco for 16 years.
Okay.
So I know my sound pretty well.
Okay.
I'm also a producer. I produce events.
So a guitarist brings in an amplifier, and he's not plugging into your system?
So you can do that a lot of ways. For instance, if we had a fixed sound system in the place, the guitar amp would go to the board and be funneled through the sound system, and the guitar player, instead of hearing it through his amp so he knew where he was in the song, he would hear it either through a monitor speaker, and more than that, today we use in-ear monitors. So that's how the guitar player. So the amp was never really meant to be a loudspeaker. It was meant for the guitar player to hear where he was with the rest of the music. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Am I explaining it right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then how do we control the sound coming out of the amplifier?
It would be the same limits that we would have for the regular amplified music, right?
Right. So in order for a band to be amplified, they'd need a soundboard. The amplifiers would have to be wired into the board and controlled by the engineer running the board.
And is that board subject to, is it then routed through your system so that it's therefore subject to these sound limiters?
So,
What we're saying is we would have it on site.
Right.
That would be required whether or not it was our.
What would you have on site? Let me, the extra talk about this.
So, we are going to purchase a compressor limiter and an equalizer. So if anybody wants to bring in their own sound, they have to run it through our equipment so that we can control the pressure of the speakers through the compressor. We can limit the sound levels, which are volume, and the equalizer will adjust the frequencies and limit them as well.
Okay, so I'm not so technical, but just so I understand it, the musician comes in, has to plug into your system,
Right.
and your system is subject to these conditions.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions of the applicant?
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Song?
Thank you. So there are no sound walls or physical sound features for absorption that you're going to be installing in the perimeter of the area?
So right now, there is a concrete 6-foot
Yeah,
wall, whatever that's around.
right,
And I don't
right,
know, is it
right.
even possible we could build that higher? I would, like if planning would let us do that, we'd be open to that. We're gonna grow up ficus much higher that we can do on our own.
Oh, so
around
you're
that.
planting a row of ficus?
Absolutely, yeah. There is some that is there, but we're gonna continue that much more robustly around the perimeter of the space as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't any other per se specific sound thing that we are planning to install over the 6 feet of the space.
Okay, and when regarding the condition of sound monitoring, how would you collect that data and then report to the staff?
So we can't, well, it's my understanding that as this is prepared, obviously I'll let the staff answer, but is that what they are suggesting is that we are subject to these reviews that are going to happen at certain times, right? And that they, at that time, if they felt that we had not adhered to the limits that are specified in here, that they could then require. So, because it is definitely an additional burden and a substantial requirement to have us have permanent built-in monitors to begin with, right? I know that has happened at one place, but didn't happen at another place, and so that's kind of individual. But I feel like these are pretty restrictive proposals that we are okay with, to accept to begin with, and that as long as we adhere to these and there are no complaints, I mean, I'm not saying we never get a single complaint, but there's no like credible, substantial complaints that happen, that does seem like a little bit of an undue burden to us from the very beginning if we are in compliance with what you are asking us to do. So, does that answer your question?
No.
No.
What I was hoping is that I think you're a wonderful organization. You know, in the next 3 months, pretend you had 5 events scheduled, and in every event, you have some recording that says it didn't go over 50 decibels and so much, you know, vibration, and you actually bring that record, and there are no complaints, and what happens is we're saying, hey, this is to work, nobody's complaining, you're doing a good job, let's seal the deal.
So I can provide you with that in one way. Asia does not own this. I own this. I own state-of-the-art dB meter. And it does record every time it's being used. And I'm not sure I know how to do this, but my head engineer does. I think we can wirelessly transmit it to a computer and print it out. It does have a rating. It would not be something that was continuous. It would have to take a human to go to the perimeter of the property line, which is where I understand your measurements are taken. Go to the perimeter of the property line intermittently and be able to run the meter for a period of time, the dB meter, and we would be able to record what's going on A-weighted, because you do dBA, so A-weighted. And we could do that for a little while. I use it in my work. I'm happy to lend it to them, to have them use it and do it, especially in their opening week, which would be like the most robust time for them, I imagine. So we can do that for you. But as far as data collection, the equipment that's required to meet your conditions does not collect data. The compressor, the limiter, the equalizer to meet your condition is not a data collection. This 1 dB meter is, and what Aaron is talking about is the sound monitoring that you provided on one of the other permits that we looked at, which had a higher dB level. I think I read it as 66 through 71, required a monitoring system that's extremely expensive around the property. And I just want to say this, that this is not the same business as the previous business. So to assume that they were going to violate in the same way that the previous business would violate is just unreasonable, because they're not going to. They're a restaurant primarily. And so their outdoor thing would be occasionally, it wouldn't be all the time, and I just don't see them violating in the same way.
Hold on just a second. Commissioner Marizzi?
So for your business plan, you would like the live entertainment to continue to be until 10 p.m., correct?
Correct, exactly. Primarily, again, for weddings is what I think that this would be appropriate. And I do not want to like negotiate against myself. You know, we're trying to ask for the broadest potential use, right, of what we could possibly do out there. I think that these are going to be relatively infrequent occasions that happen out there. Yes, it's 7 days a week between these hours, but it's not like all of a sudden there's going to be all this activity and music going on out there. It's kind of what we want to get away from, more of what the previous tenant did. So yes, we are asking for that as the possible time that could incur. And it has to be within the limits of the,
Right,
you know, the
everything still
sound
has to
limits that are
remain.
laid out in this. Yeah.
Okay,
correct.
good. I wanted to clarify that.
I just wanted to not make a distinction between certainly a live music end at a certain time and then the recorded music end at a certain time.
Commissioner Donovan?
It was never our intention to put these music venues in data collection modes. I mean, that's not what they do. I think we've gone with the Infusion Beach model. We've gone really far. You've got self-regulators. You've got mechanisms that will turn the music lower if they sense it getting higher. And you've got the best sounding board in the world. Excuse the pun. But the neighbors, we're going to hear from the neighbors and code enforcement.
Yes.
And with the 6-month check, we're going to know, is it working or is it not working? And if it's not working, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board.
Thank you. I agree. Yes.
Exactly.
Any more questions of the applicant? So just thank you very much for
Of
coming
course.
up. Thank you,
guys
Aaron.
for
Thank
your
you, Audrey.
consideration. Yes.
Just a question of staff. Do you remember, and you may not remember, on 29 or Colony 29, did we do it till 10? I thought, because that was an occasional wedding as well. It was almost the same.
Yeah,
and
I
their neighbors.
believe that we did it until 10 PM. That's kind of the standard that we've been using generally for our event house properties, and we continue that on to their conditional use permit.
Great, thank you. Now, I guess I'd like to close the public, there's no public hearing, I'm sorry. Discussion amongst us. Commissioner Gardner.
Just have one more question. With the other, when it was Hacienda, it was only until 6, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I do think that we should review sooner than 6 months, only because there were a lot of complaints at that property. And again, it's not to say that you all will do that, but because we're extending the time to 10, and it used to be 6 when we had complaints, I think we should review earlier, just to make sure that everything's okay, and that to let the community know as well that we do understand that they have concerns about noise and that we're monitoring it closely.
So do you want to make a motion and tell us the time frame? Are you looking at 3 months, 4 months?
Sure, I would make a motion to do a 3-month review and to allow until 10 PM live music and recorded.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Hirschman?
Can we say 3 month and 6 month?
Yes, that's fine.
They both shook their heads yes. Any more discussion? Okay, I'll call for the question. Let's vote.
Can the second enter? Can you go ahead and enter?
Oh, the second, yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
Got it. Unanimous. Aaron, congratulations. You didn't have an opportunity to plug it this time, but there will be, I think, plenty of opportunity to plug it at a better audience, a wider audience. And thank you for taking one of our buildings that had been vacant for a long time and transforming it into something hopefully that's very successful. All right, thank you.
It's all the time.
I know.
It's permissible.
Okay, we're going on to item number 4B, which is a request of Christopher Holmes for the approval of a final plan development plans for 70 single-family residential units within Phase 1 of the Miralon development located at 801 Sunrise Way. Can we have a staff report, please?
Chair Woods and Planning Commissioners, this item is a request for final development plan approval for Christopher Holmes and the Aura project located within the Miralon development. The 70 homes that are being presented today are located near the southerly end of the development adjacent to San Rafael Road. The site is abutting, sorry, excuse me one second. Yeah, so, sorry, the site's abutting, as I said, San Rafael Road on the south side of the development. It's located to the east of Indian Canyon Drive. And the applicant, as he said during his public comments earlier in the meeting, has been working with the city's subcommittee, which comprised of 2 planning commissioners and 2 AAC members, to work through the final designs of these homes. So the homes that are, the applicant has proposed before you, there's 3 floor plans that they are presenting. Each home site does have a primary tree, which you see here in the front of the home. They do have a landscape palette that was selected to be consistent with the architectural guidelines that were approved by City Council in November of 16. And so there are 3 plans, Plan 1, 2, and 3. There are 3 variations of each plan. So plan, you see here, Plan 1, variation A, B, and C are shown on the screen, and this is the street elevation for Plan 1. Floor plan is consistent pretty much across the board. It's generally 3 bedrooms, kitchen area, living area, 2-car garage, and space for an outdoor pool, courtyard areas. These homes are 1-story. And they have provided different angles of each of the axometric views of the homes. So again, variation B, similar floor plan, also 1-story, a flat roof with different fenestration around the building. And for variation C of floor plan 1, also flat roof, different fenestration around the building. Plan 2, as you see here on the screen, also 3 variations, A, B, and C. You do see the common theme throughout the development, which provided unified consistency in the design. This Plan 2A, variation A, has a flat and shed roof. And you can see the various angles of the home around in this plan here. So again, these plans were reviewed by the AAC subcommittee, Planning Commission subcommittee, in January, March, and April of this year. The subcommittee, the AAC then reviewed the plans on July 15th of this year and recommended approval unanimously to the Planning Commission as submitted. Staff has reviewed the project against the required findings in Section 9403 of the Zoning Code and has prepared a resolution for your consideration to adopt today that the plan is consistent with the preliminary development plan. We'd also note that the plans are consistent with the architectural guidelines for the Miralon development. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. As you've heard, the applicant is also here if you have additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go on, Michael, were you on the subcommittee for this particular one? I know Grace was at the hearing. Did you want to report out, Grace, while Michael?
Actually, now that I remember, they did a quick look at them and they said, yep, this is what we wanted. It was really fast. Nobody, yeah, AAC had no comments. All of the subcommittee suggestions had been met. They loved it. They said move forward. There really was almost no discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. Are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Hirschbein?
So I'm looking at the staff report, starting at the bottom of page 6, subcommittee review, January 30, March 14, April 1, and there's, I don't know, a dozen or more bullet points.
Agreed.
Oh, it's on, isn't it? It says it's on. Sorry. So I'm on starting at the bottom of page 6 of the staff report. There's a dozen or so, maybe more, bullet points. Has staff reviewed those bullet points against the submitted drawings and is verifying that those have all been part of the submittal?
I'm sorry, I wasn't the original planner on this, but to my recollection, from my understanding of what they've presented, the plans do address these items.
And I'll just go ahead and jump in and say, yes, they have. And there's a statement in the staff report that says the applicant has submitted revised plans incorporating the subcommittee's comments to the designs.
Well, I'm assuming the applicant would say that.
No, that's staff who said that.
Okay.
The applicant didn't write the staff report.
Okay, sorry. I apologize.
Although there are cities where the applicant does write the staff report, so we're very fortunate here. Are there any other questions of staff at this point? Hearing no questions, is the applicant here?
He sure is.
Okay. I will open the public hearing. You'll have 10 minutes to speak about your project. Oh, excuse me.
Public hearing.
It's not a public hearing. Do you want to hear from the applicant?
A long day.
It's a long day. Just to stay on hold, and maybe there'll be a question coming up later. I so apologize.
No,
It's
no
been
problem.
a long afternoon. So it's discussion amongst us at this point. Oh, you do have questions for the applicant. I apologize. We're giving you exercise. There is a question of the applicant.
Yes.
And there's,
My colleagues are going to be, you're not at AC anymore. Okay.
No, go for it.
Okay. Okay, so I like where you're going. The couple of questions about, a little bit about control joint, too excessive on the control joint, almost erring to the commercial side. Okay, so for example, on the very top one, on the archway that you have designed, you have a control joint smack right in the middle, right, of that archway. And what's interesting to me is that you have sort of these rectilinear forms, and then when you throw in that control joint, it gets it back to more of a rectangular or squarish kind of proportion. So simply said, can you just put a control joint along the bottom line and then get rid of the one in the middle so it doesn't interrupt that archway? And so second way of simply said is to say, could you review the control joints and be, 1/3 less than what you have right now? Because I think it's breaking your lines a bit too much.
I don't have a problem with that. A lot of those control joints were developed through the process. This list here, which I had no contribution to any of this report, just to clarify that. But this list here was a list of all the items, major items that we did cover during those meetings. And all these items were addressed as we continued to come back during those other, of the 3 meetings that we had. So yes, all these items were implemented, and this one, as long as, it was made clear with staff, we can certainly work with staff to make sure that that's something that's revised in the construction drawings.
Okay, then on page 25 of your submittal, you have variation A, which you have that shed roof on several schemes, and you have three rafters or beams. It's on the shed. Which one's the slope roof? Right there. Okay.
It's on the cover, actually.
Yeah. Oh, yes, on the cover. There's one where, anyway, let's start with this one. So again, with this one having one being in the middle, I think the proportion looks better if there's 4 equally divided. Because it was really, there's a reason why, anyway. So the 3, and then the middle control joint kind of throws off the whole, I think, design that you're trying to put together. Then there's, I think it's the other side. So variation A, front side, what happens is the flat roof, when it dives into the shed roof, David, you don't have to happen to have variation A.
Here it is.
One more page, I think. No? You have this roof where it's flat at the front, and then there's a shed. There you go. Oh, one before that. There you go. So the top one, do you see where the rafters sort of?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So if you can clean that up and then have a total of 4, I think that would make it more balanced.
Yeah, so just as a discussion point, that was something that was added at one of the last meetings and was really, we didn't have any of those rafter tails to begin with. And one of the comments was to show a purpose or connection between the building and the roof. And that was our interpretation of showing that connection, or that, to see some of the structure. And so, as long as that's something that we're not going backwards with the rest of the commission or with the particular committee member that made that comment, I don't see any problems with doing that, as long as, working with staff to do that.
It's a challenge. I mean, it's a large number of homes very close to each other. So because there's so many details, you're trying to be a little more balanced. So in some ways, I know I'm contradicting, but a little more on the beams and then a little less on the control joints, I think will make it a little more balanced.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't have a problem with that. I'd just like to mention quickly that, I do realize, and we do realize as a builder, that, we're dealing with a whole lot of opinions, but in this particular case, we're dealing with a whole lot of expert opinions, and we really do appreciate that input. And hopefully we've shown that we're really taking these comments to heart, and we're moving forward with these suggestions. And as I said earlier, we really feel that we ended up with a much better product at the end of the day with all these comments. So,
Who are you for saying that?
you'll probably never hear that from another developer again.
Any more questions of the applicant while the applicant's here? Okay, thank you. I just, we're in discussion now. Can you explain on what you asked as a change on variation A? I was a little unclear, Maria, I'm sorry.
So, no, this is good. So these proportions are foreign to what he's designing. So if there was none of that and that, it would be a clean line that would connect the garage to the home. So when it comes, he's very repetitive on that control joint, that control joint, that control joint, and that control joint. And I know there's a plaster requirement, but he can have a control joint underneath that, and it will meet the same requirement. So by having less, it cleans it up a little bit more. And then when it comes to these rafters, in reality, the span between these size beams is about 4 feet, because that's what the plywood panel size is. So if you had 2 more there, then it works very well with those control joints.
I would agree with that, not as an architect, but it seems aesthetically nice. Thank you. And the applicant would agree to those changes if so imposed? Okay.
Thank you for clarifying
Thank you.
that.
Any more discussion between us? Do I hear a motion?
So I would like to move the staff report with the 2 additional requirements with respect to what Ms. Song just described. I
Second?
won't try to repeat what she just described, but I do understand it, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Whoops, we got it back. Yeah, there we go. So the motion is made by Donnenfeld, seconded by Song. Can we call the question and vote? Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. I hope to see them built soon.
We're excited.
Thank you. Okay. Almost the last item on the agenda, not completely. Item 4C, Pinnacle Palm Springs LLC for a major architectural application for the construction of a 4,527 square foot house on a hillside lot and an administrative minor modification for a reduction in the front yard setback and an increase in the building height. located at 1730 Pinnacle Point. Can we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll have a brief presentation on some slides here that are before you. So Lot 10 is the third house that you've seen for this developer, Brian Foster. So you approved Lot 2, which is across the street, Lot 7, which is at the end of the cul-de-sac, and now you're here to see Lot 10. And earlier in the meeting, a resident had shown you an aurora that runs the back of this house. You can clearly see it on this aerial. So I wanted to point that out before I move forward. It runs along the back of the property. So the rear of the property, if you can see this sort of lighted area where there's no vegetation or rocks. And when the subdivision was platted, there were buildable areas, and this was notable that you did not want to grade into this area, which pushes the developable area forward. And that's one of the justifications for the administrative minor modification to reduce the front yard setbacks. So for lots 2 and lot 7, and then the 3 houses that are already constructed, we have reduced the front yard setback to 18 feet. And 18 feet allows a car to park off of the street and in the driveway that leads into the garage. So what they're asking for is a setback reduction of the front yard from 25, which they would need normally do, to 18. And that's consistent with the rest of the development. So as I said, the house is 4,000 some square feet. It's an L-shaped lot with the front driveway leading into a 2-car garage. There's a main portion of the house, and then there's a guest house that runs to the west. I'll quickly go through some of these slides. This is a coloring rendering of the design of the house with the pool in the west-facing side. As I mentioned, the road slopes from the east to the west. So on this slide, on the right-hand side is the higher end, and on the left-hand side is the lower end. And there's a retaining wall that is currently or will be constructed along the east property line, which you can see on the right-hand side of the slide. The landscape plan includes a variation of desert plants, acacia, 36-inch box trees, different types of rubble and decomposed granite, cactus and agave plants. The material board that has been passed around to you shows all the main stucco color, which is the brown, a darker color, which is an accent. And accent number 2 is actually the garage door. The project was reviewed by the AAC twice, back in June and then in July. And in the staff report, there's a listing of what the discussion was by the AAC. One of the second time that the house went back for AAC review, there was a discussion of accent number 2, which is the garage door, that the color of the garage door was a little bit too greenish tint. That color has been eliminated, and the color that's before you today, which is Dunn Edwards 6366, is what they're proposing. The color board is similar to the color, but it's not exactly the 6366, so I just want to point that out. So the design of the house is a screen, a sort of box that goes along the guest room. The front entry is onto a gate and then into the courtyard with a window to a bedroom, and then the garage on the right-hand side. So these are variations of some of the designs. One of the recommendations from AAC was to add a cantilever over the garage. In this photograph, it doesn't show it, but I'm going to get to a few that do show it. And this slide shows the relationship to the slope of the street, and then the houses that are currently built, which is the tan house, and then the new house on the left above this house on lot 7. One of the recommendations from the AAC, there's a master bedroom, which is where the gray box is, was to extend an overhang, and they did that, so that meets one of the requirements of the AAC. The top shed roof is 18 feet, which meets the requirements of the zone. If I can go back to Sorry, new fancy pointer. So on this slide, I'd like to talk about a little bit the heights. As I mentioned, it's 18 feet setback from the front yard setback. The corner of the guest wing on the left-hand side is 14 feet 6 inches tall, which is above what would be allowed at the setback line, which is 12 feet. So part of the AMM is to reduce the front yard setback and increase the building height to 14 feet 6 inches. And then at the garage, it also is at 12 feet 6 inches. So the house is requesting, or the applicant is requesting a increase in building height. This is, the Planning Commission has done this with other houses. The existing houses that are there are above the 12-foot maximum height limit. And the Planning Commission can achieve this through the AMM process. So going back to the garage, this is a new exhibit showing the eyebrow that they're proposing to add above the garage. And this is another side view showing how it will project over the garage. And there's a series of, if the Planning Commission remembers, at the last houses, you've requested that there be photo simulations showing what it looks like from different street views. This is at the top of the hill, looking down from Lot 7. You can see the roof of this house. This is looking up the street from the gate when you come into the development. There's Lot 2 on the right, and then this new house on the left. Once again, this is from outside the gate, looking up at the development. And this is looking across there's a wash that runs, and this is from Ridgemore across in the Andreas neighborhood. And in your packet, there's always a series of floor plans. There's site sections. There's the AAC was interested in how the box element section was devised, and this is what this is showing. The cross sections of the street versus the retaining walls, grading plan, and then lighting. The applicant provided the AAC detail lighting fixture showing the adjustable slot aperture that would focus the light down onto the outdoor areas and not have light spill into the area. This is a photograph of an actual house that the applicant has built showing how this light shielding works. And then some photographs showing the existing conditions out on the site. I don't have any photographs of the swale that runs in the back of the lot, but this kind of shows how steep it is in this photograph. So in your staff report, there are findings that the Planning Commission can make to approve the major architectural and also the administrative minor modification to reduce the front yard setback and the increase in building height. So that concludes my report, and I'm here to answer your question, and so is the applicant.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Hirschbein.
The member of the public that talked about that drainage swale, I don't know what his issue was, but did it bring up any concern to you?
Let me go back to the aerial photograph. So and I haven't been up on the site, but I have been over there. They did some grading on Lot 2 and on Lot 7, which is the top of the hill, and they did grade into the swale, and our engineering department was out there, and Rick may have some comments.
We received a call that their contractor up there had done some work in the space between the two lots and also in the I guess the common area outside of the lot that they were permitted to be doing some grading work on. And our inspector went up there and saw that they had indeed gone off the site a bit to do some off-site grading, which was not included in their grading plans. And so we informed the developer and the contractor to cease those operations until we had some kind of resolution from the HOA. And he is in the talks with the HOA to try to get this resolved. I did speak with a member of the HOA this morning, and we discussed, and I had not had a chance to convey this to the developer yet. They would like to see some kind of an exhibit showing how they're going to restore the area once they're done with the grading, and how they plan on restoring it, and then what's going to happen with it afterwards. They're going to hydroseed, they're going to put back some boulders.
But this doesn't pertain to this lot, does it?
No, but the same type of operation could occur, and so what the exhibit is going to do, and the agreement between the developer and the HOA, is to address all of the open space lots between all of the remaining lots, so that this doesn't occur again, or
Okay.
that we have a resolution to it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Song?
So, Rick, this black outline shows the property line, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and about a fifth down from the north side, if north is up, we have this natural arroyo ditch running through,
Correct.
correct? Okay, so when I look at their landscape or civil and precise grading plan, from what I could tell is that the steep slope that's going quickly down within the 15-foot setback is part of that part of that drainage.
Correct, which is on that property, within that property boundary.
Okay, so he is allowed to grade that because it's his property?
Well, yes, he is allowed to grade within there, but their grading plans will be reviewed by our plan checkers and by the city engineer. And we also want to make sure that whatever grading is done in there, it's going to be restored so that the flow is not disrupted, and that the embankment or whatever their overax is going to be protected by erosion control, which they are showing some of that in here with the boulders that they're proposing in there. I suspect that the plan check that we do on this, once this is submitted for plan check, that there'll be a little bit more description in there as to how they're going to reinforce that little slope of that arroyo that's running through that property. So by our drainage rules, they are required to accept and convey all off-site flows coming onto the property, so they have to accept it, convey it properly, and push it back out historically where it's always gone. And as the result of the end grading of this, they'll have to demonstrate on the plans that they can do that.
And really, the major goal at the end of the day is that that swale is not disrupted.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, there may be
it
some
is.
disruption, but it
Uh-huh.
will be restored.
But the volume and
Correct.
the flow.
The volume will still be the same, the outfall, the infall and the outfall will still be the same.
Okay, and then Glenn, I think I was at the AAC for this. What was the discussion about the pool fencing? Because right now the rendering shows it without, pool fencing.
Right, so we've had a lot of discussion on some of these other lots about the pool fencing. If you remember at Lot 7, there was a combination of a glass panel and a rock, we don't know, there was no, his intention, he may want to answer this question,
Right.
is that they're, based upon the slopes, that they won't need a fence. There's a process through the building department that you can get sort of a waiver for the fencing. I'm not convinced that that's the case, but right now we don't have a fencing plan before us.
Okay.
But when it comes through plan check, we do look at that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions of the staff? Did anyone want to ask the applicant any questions? Okay, hearing that we don't want to answer, let's discussion amongst us. Or do I hear a motion? Motion would be great. It is 5:15. Okay. All right.
And I second that.
Okay. Any discussions?
Okay, so two adjustments would be to go on record about the perimeter fencing for the swimming pool.
Do you want to see it, or what are you saying about it?
That the design should be brought in.
To Planning Commission?
No, to AAC.
AC, okay.
Yes. Okay, all right. No, okay.
Oh, no, I'll accept that.
Okay, and then the second thing is that, this is more of a suggestion, that the eyebrow at the garage could be lower, so it's.
Well, make it a requirement or drop it, so,
Okay, I'll make it into a requirement. Drop the eyebrow. So-
okay, I'll accept it.
Okay.
How low is the eyebrow now?
All right, I feel a whip.
Do we have some discussion here?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes.
I know that the city council is trying to reduce the number of times these things go back to AAC, and I think they wanted to limit, what is their current recommendation? Twice?
Once.
Or once?
Once.
But this is only the fence design.
Yeah, but it still has to go back to AAC and takes time. According to what we just heard, through plan check, they're going to, require some sort of fencing
Right,
plan? Or?
the fencing will come through as a plan check when it goes in for building construction documents. We will have to see a fence, and the building department will render if they can get a waiver or they have to come in with a design.
I just don't think it's fair to send it back again for the third time to AAC.
Should have included the fence then.
Yeah.
I'm okay with the modification to the motion.
Okay, so the modification was two modifications. One is for the fence design to go to AAC. The second one was to lower the eyebrow at the garage. We have a first and second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. The motion passes. Congratulations. This is.
Interesting day. Peter,
I'm sorry to make you wait so long, but it's probably the easiest one you've gone through of all of them.
Maintaining, he doesn't need a fence.
Yeah, but it's going to be
But
determined.
Glenn is saying he thinks he does need a fence.
It's going to be determined through plan check whether it's needed.
Right.
But
But the design should be, well, anyway, it's already,
I don't know, just,
he may not need a fence.
I'm going with the city council, which
His
is
point is they're
once
going to
or
restrict
twice.
how many times the AAC can
Exactly.
see something.
Okay, next on the agenda is Planning Commission reports, requests, and comments. Are there any reports, requests, or comments from my planning commissioners? Anybody? Commissioner Gardner, did you have one?
I kind of have just a question about earlier today with the cannabis things. So because it did take a lot of our time, and I think there's going to be a lot more discussion once we get more back from you the next meeting. What is the process if we don't finish reviewing it, if we feel like we need more time? I'm just curious now instead of asking then.
While the city council would like to have recommendations from you by the end of the month, and that only gives us the next meeting to do that, there's always the possibility that you may be able to extend. Let me do this. Let me talk with the city council subcommittee, see if there's any issues if we continue this through your first meeting in October.
Okay. And again, I don't know if that will happen, but just in case.
Okay, Commissioner Maruzi.
The Tova Hotel project. I had sent in an email with a number of questions, and I was hoping to get some sort of response. Do you want me to repeat the questions?
No, actually, if you'll just go ahead and read the response that David Racio gave you, because I won't have any different information.
Did he send me a response?
Yes, he did yesterday afternoon.
I don't seem to have it. Do you have it?
I think I do. Hang on a second here.
And it went to, well, let me check my emails again, because I don't remember seeing that.
Let's see. Let's see. Let me do this. I will forward it to you.
So everyone, they're looking that up, everyone knows where the Tovar Hotel is? It's the Marriott across from the Infusion, okay.
Right next to Rick's.
Right next to Rick's.
Let's see. So in response to the questions, what is the status of the citation? What is the penalty? Current status is the owner has reached out to us to register the property as vacant. They are required to register the property annually until they begin pulling permits to start construction. Penalty for citations starts at $1,500 and goes up to $15,000.
A day?
It doesn't say here. Again, this is not the zoning ordinance, so I'm not going to be a subject matter expert. What specific citation will be issued if the owners fail to comply by September 28th? Since the owner is complying with registering the property, securing and maintaining the property, we will not cite the owner. So they are going through the process to cure the
So
violation.
you're saying register it as vacant?
As vacant.
You just have to register, yeah, it's vacant. Well, we all know it's vacant. It's been vacant for
Well, they're
years.
subject then to the city's vacant building ordinance in terms of securing the property, et cetera.
My concern isn't about security, it's about the fact that it's a blight. According to the way that the ordinance is written, it's an abandoned, or if they had, within 6 months, not done any construction on it under the current code or ordinance, then it's in violation. Whether it's registered, whatever the term is, or not.
Okay. Well, what I might recommend then is forward your request to the city attorney.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Didn't just on that same comment, but that came before us just not too long ago to put an underground. They were going to put a restaurant in the front with some underground parking. Was that 6 months
Correct.
ago? Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, we just recently approved the
But
conditional
they
use
have a lot of
permit
things that
for
get
it.
approved but never built. Sure, they have an approval, but they haven't done anything.
Right. Okay. The next thing is planning director's report.
Just looking at your agenda on the 25th, and what I would like to do is reserve enough time for you to discuss the cannabis ordinance. There is one item that I'm going to move off the agenda. There's a couple of items that should be rather quick discussions. But what I'm wondering is, would we like to start the Planning Commission meeting a little bit earlier on that date, just to make sure that we can get through the agenda? And that is,
would be
again,
on
September the 25th.
26th.
No, there isn't. There isn't. I think it might, just to be on the safe side. I would start at noon, and we would be happy to feed you lunch before then.
On the 25th?
This is on September the 25th. Will that work with your calendars?
No problem here. Anyone else? Okay, not sure, but I assume it's lunchtime, so.
But again, we will feed you beforehand.
I'm not, I can't remember if I sent you an email, but I will not be present for that meeting.
Oh, okay.
So can you come earlier?
But yeah, if I can highlight on what Ms. Grace has said about taking a little more time, I think I ditto the fact that we feel a bit rushed going through that very important ordinance.
Okay.
Great. Anything else?
No.
All right, then, if with no objection, the Planning Commission will adjourn to 12 noon on Wednesday, September 24th, here at the City Hall Council Chambers. What did I say? September 25th. September 25th, everyone.